Chapter 604. In our previous life, the 8 of us had yet to reach the end of our predestined lifespans and had accumulated some merit. Therefore, King Yinluo gave us a way out and allowed us to reincarnate as humans again. Tian Xian, who was ranked first among the 8 Yin-Yang disciples, said to Giseng Duji, "Only then did the 8 of us return to Kunlun and enter Taoism again." "I see," Giseng Duji nodded and said. After being reincarnated as humans, the 8 of us concealed our identities and cultivated day and night in Kunlun Mountain, all for the sake of finding Eldritch reincarnation and taking revenge for his death back then. Di Kuan, who was ranked second, continued, "Heaven rewards those who persevere. Master, you're so skilled in Buddhism that you were able to capture his reincarnation alive and hold the demon slaying conference. It's really a blessing for the common people." "Master, you're too kind." Giseng Duji gestured for everyone to sit down as he sat on the main seat and said, "Master, you may not know this, but Eldritch has already joined the demon path in this life. If he's not eliminated, he'll definitely bring disaster to the world and plunge the people into misery and suffering. The purpose of holding this demon-slaying conference is to tell the world that evil will never prevail over good, and that karma is real." Giseng Duji did not mention the grudge between him and Eldritch back then. That way, it would show that he cared about all living beings and understood the great Tao. "Master, you're so merciful. We admire you very much." Tian Xian bowed to Giseng Duji and said, "May I know where Eldritch is now? We can't let this evil creature escape again." "Master, don't worry. This demon is now kept in the golden Buddha treasure bowl. Even if he grows wings, he won't be able to escape," Giseng Duji said to Tian Xian with a smile. The 8 of them looked at each other after hearing that. No wonder Giseng Duji was able to capture the reincarnated Eldritch alive. It turned out that he used the golden Buddha treasure bowl, one of the 3 secret weapons of Tibet. "Master, it's safe to keep this demon in the golden Buddha treasure bowl, but it's too easy for this evil creature." Di Kuan said to Giseng Duji, "He's torturing living beings and killing all living beings. He must suffer a little." "Oh." Giseng Duji looked at Di Kuan. "Master, you mean? Grandmaster, you can release him and tie him up. As for the snowstorm outside, punish him publicly as a warning to others." Di Kuan said to Giseng Duji, "This way, the righteous people who are about to hear the news to see his miserable state and vent the resentment in their hearts." As soon as Di Kuan said this, the other 7 sons stroked their beards and nodded in agreement. "Taoist priest's method is indeed good, but it's too risky," Giseng Duji said. "This demon's devil spirit is now strong, and it's full of spiritual energy. It also has secret treasures. If it's released, it's very likely that it will return to the sea and return to the forest. At that time, it'll be as difficult as ascending to heaven to catch it." "Grandmaster, you worry too much." Di Kuan smiled slightly after hearing Giseng Duji's words. "Grandmaster may not know, but in order to catch this evil creature, the 8 of us spent nearly 100 years to refine a treasure called the octagonal pillar. This pillar contains yin and yang inside, 8 poles outside, the power of the 5 elements, and the power of water and fire. As long as that evil creature is tied to this octagonal pillar, no matter how strong his spiritual power is, he will be powerless. 8 extreme magic pillars." Giseng Duji frowned. Di Kuan's words made him fall into deep thought. He practiced Buddhism, so he knew very little about Taoist spells and treasures. He hesitated for a moment. He also wanted to make Eldritch suffer, but he knew that Eldritch's ability was beyond his imagination. Once he left the golden Buddha treasure bowl, the consequences would be unpredictable. Speaking of which, Di Kuan had boasted about the octopole spell pillars to the heavens. Who knew if this thing was as powerful as he said? He couldn't be careless. "Master, this old monk understands." Giseng Duji thought for a moment and said, "But this demon is from Bufan. His cultivation is very high. We can't be careless, so it's better to be safe." In other words, it was better to keep Eldritch in the golden Buddha treasure bowl. Di Kuan looked at Tian Xian. Tianqian understood immediately. I have a method that can make Eldritch publicly punish him and make him invisible. Would you like to hear it? Tianqian cupped his hands and said to Gesang Duji, "Oh, Master, what good method do you have? Please tell me." Gesang Duji said to Tianqian, "We can combine Buddhism and Taoism to suppress this evil creature's cultivation." Tianqian smiled and said to Gesang Duji, "Combine Buddhism and Taoism?" Gesang Duji frowned and asked how. He didn't understand what Tianqian meant. "It's very simple." Tianqian smiled and explained, "Master, you can release Eldritch from the golden Buddha treasure bowl and let the 8 of us tie him to the 8 extreme spell pillar. Then, you can use the golden Buddha treasure bowl to illuminate him. This way, nothing will go wrong." When Tianqian said this, the other 7 people smiled and nodded. This method could be said to be the best of both worlds. It couldn't be more suitable. After listening to Tianqian's method, Gesang Duji also nodded repeatedly. Using the 8 extreme spell pillar to bind Eldritch, and then using the golden Buddha treasure bowl to illuminate him. It could punish him publicly and make him unable to escape. It was indeed a good method. "Master Gesang Duji, what do you think?" Tianqian asked Gesang Duji. "All right, since that's the case, we'll do as you said and punish the evil creature publicly." Gesang Duji said slowly. "Good." Tianqian agreed. When the other 7 people saw Gesang Duji agree to this method, they were immediately overjoyed. They couldn't wait to humiliate Eldritch. For hundreds of years, the 8 of them had been hiding in the Kunlun Mountains and cultivating diligently in order to take revenge for their past lives. This day had finally come. "Master, there's no time to lose. Let's go and set up the spell pillars now," Tianqian said as he stood up from his seat and cupped his hands to Gesang Duji. "All right, this old monk will go with you and see the glory of the Taoist masters." Gesang Duji also stood up from his seat and said to the crowd. "All right," Tianqian said as he stretched out his hand. "Master, please." Gesang Duji nodded slightly and slowly walked out of the door. He was the abbot of the Sweet Dew Temple and the one who captured Eldritch. Naturally, he had to walk in front. The 8 yin-yang disciples followed closely behind. After a while, the group of 9 people arrived at the open snowy ground outside the Sweet Dew Temple. Although it was just past noon, the wind was still biting cold and piercing to the bone. The wind swept up large pieces of snowflakes, making whistling sounds. This place is flat and wide. It's the most suitable place to be the center of the evil exorcism conference. We'll use the 8 extreme spell pillar to trap that evil creature here. What do you think, Master Gesang Duji? Tianqian looked at the surrounding environment and said to Gesang Duji, who was wearing a Lama monk robe. Gesang Duji nodded. His purpose was to humiliate Eldritch and let the world know about it. Then he would kill him in the evil exorcism conference to avenge the loss of his arm in his previous life. He didn't care about anything else. As long as he didn't let Eldritch escape, the 8 yin-yang disciples could do whatever they wanted with Eldritch. Seeing that Gesang Duji agreed, Tianqian nodded slightly to the 7 people behind him. The 7 people understood and quickly gathered together. They each took a position and circled a huge open space with a radius of 90 feet. After the 8 people stood still, they each swung the horsetail whisk in their hands and closed their eyes to concentrate. Their expressions were solemn as they muttered incantations. Gesang Duji stood outside the circle and watched the 8 people cast their spells without blinking. 8 Extreme Spell Pillar. The name is quite intimidating. I wonder how powerful it is. Gesang Duji thought to himself. Heaven and earth are infinite. Yin and yang are universal. Tianqian, who was the leader, chanted the incantation and suddenly opened his eyes as he shouted loudly. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as Heavenly Heaven finished speaking, 8 huge pillars of light spun from the bodies of the yin-yang 8 disciples, shooting straight up into the sky. The pillars of light were about 10 feet thick. 4 of them were black, and the other 4 were white. The flowing brilliance was dazzling and eye-catching. Whoosh! The huge airwaves formed by the 8 black and white pillars of light lifted the thick layer of snow under the 8 people's feet. It was as if 8 snow dragons had left the ground and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, there was not a single Feishue in the open space within a radius of several hundred feet. What a domineering spell! What profound spiritual energy! The 8 yin-yang disciples who used to be all-powerful and domineering in the pugilistic world indeed lived up to their reputation. Gesang Duji thought to himself as he looked at the 8 yin-yang 8 masters with their hair and beards fluttering in the light beam. The 8 yin-yang disciples continued to cast their spells. At this time, the 8 people in the dazzling pillars of light had already opened their eyes. They placed their horsetail whisks on their arms and made hand seals. Demon subduing 8 extreme spell pillar. Tian Qian, who was the leader, shouted again, "Combine!" As Tian Qian said the word combine, the hand seals of the 8 people instantly turned into sword fingers and pointed at the center of the space. Whoosh! 8 golden light talismans shot out from the 8 people's sword fingers. The light talismans were 3 feet long and shone with a dazzling golden light. These 8 golden light talismans were formed by several horizontal lines. They represented the Qian, Kuan, Zhen, Sun, Canli, Jin, and Dui of the yin-yang 8 trigrams. After the light talismans shot out from the 8 yin-yang disciples' sword fingers, they instantly merged on the ground in the center of the 8 people, forming an octagonal circle of light. Within the circle of light, the black and white yin-yang fish chased each other and slowly circled around. "Rise!" Tian Qian suddenly shouted. The remaining 7 understood tacitly and slowly raised their sword fingers in unison. Whoosh! As the 8 people raised their sword fingers, the black and white yin-yang 8 trigrams on the ground in the center slowly rose. As it rose, a huge pillar of light appeared out of nowhere. The pillar of light was 8 feet thick and had 8 sides. It was 9 feet tall and dazzling with golden light. On the 8 pillars of light, there were carvings of 8 5-clawed golden dragons with angry eyes. The golden dragon's whiskers fluttered in the wind, and auspicious clouds swirled around them. One impressive 8 extreme spell pillar. Gesang Duji, who was standing at the side, looked at the huge golden pillar with auspicious clouds swirling around it and praised it from the bottom of his heart. When the 8 yin-yang disciples saw that the pillar of light was completed, they immediately retracted their spiritual power and returned it to their bodies. "Master Gesang, are you satisfied with this 8 extreme spell pillar?" Tian Qian waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and came to Gesang Duji's side. Gesang Duji put his palms together and praised, "My fellow Taoists, your power is profound, and the 8 extreme spell pillar is magnificent. This old monk is impressed, very impressed. Master, you flatter us." Tian Qian returned the salute and said, "Master, please release that evil creature and bind it with the 8 extreme spell pillar." Chapter 605. After taking out the treasure bowl, Gesang Dorje stood with one hand and chanted a mantra. Whoosh! As Gesang Dorje chanted the mantra, the 3-inch treasure bowl in his hand instantly grew to the size of 9 inches, dazzling with golden light. The treasure bowl was smooth and ancient, shining with golden light. Auspicious qi lingered around it, and the light of Buddha shone brightly. On top of the treasure bowl, there was a statue of Buddha sitting cross-legged on it, looking solemn and dignified. What a golden Buddha treasure bowl! When the 8 yin-yang disciples saw the golden Buddha treasure bowl, one of the 3 legendary Tibetan secret weapons, they couldn't help but praise it in their hearts. No wonder Eldritch was so easily subdued. This golden Buddha treasure bowl was indeed worthy of its reputation. After finishing the mantra, Gesang Dorje raised the treasure bowl in his hand high with both hands. The bowl was facing the sky, and the mouth of the bowl was facing the towering 8 extreme spell pillars in front of him. "Evil creature, show yourself quickly." Gesang Dorje shouted softly. Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, thousands of dazzling golden lights shot down from the treasure bowl in his hand. At this time, Yifan was thinking hard about how to deal with the situation in the bamboo forest. Suddenly, he found that the surrounding bamboo forest was suddenly swept up by a strong wind and swayed violently. When Yifan saw this, he frowned. "It seems that Lama wants to release you and let you suffer," the white-robed Yifan sitting opposite the stone table said calmly as he drank his tea. Buzz, as soon as the white-robed Yifan finished speaking, a huge golden pillar of light fell vertically from the clouds above the bamboo forest and instantly enveloped Yifan below. Yifan only felt a huge suction force pulling him up from the ground and slowly flying up. And he didn't have the slightest strength to resist. What should come has finally come. Yifan thought to himself with his brows furrowed and his black robe fluttering. "Remember what I said to you." Yifan stood up from the stone bench with his white robe fluttering in the wind. He looked up at the black-robed Yifan, who had already flown away from the bamboo forest, and said. Yifan, who was in midair, nodded slowly. The suction force of the golden light pillar grew stronger and stronger, and Yifan's speed of ascension also increased. In the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared into the golden light pillar in the clouds. I have a pearl that has been locked away by dust for a long time. Now that the dust of the morning is gone, the light shines through the mountains and rivers. After the white-robed Yifan watched the black-robed Yifan fly into the clouds, he said with a smile as he shook his white robe and slowly walked into the depths of the bamboo forest, whoosh, as countless golden beams poured down for the golden Buddha bowl in Gesang Dorj's hand. Yifan, clad in a black robe, flew out from the bowl in a flash. Thump! With his strength suppressed, Yifan fell heavily onto the base of the dazzling 8 extremities spell pillars. Buzz! The moment Yifan's body came into contact with the 8 extreme spell pillars, the 8 lifelike 5-clawed golden dragons that coiled around the spell pillars instantly became dazzling and began to swim around at high speed. Clang! As the 8 golden dragons swam, they slowly turned into 8 golden chains that were as thick as an adult's wrist. Whoosh! Before Yifan could stand up, the 8 thick golden chains rushed toward Yifan from 8 different directions as if they were sentient. Whoosh! The 8 golden chains transformed from the golden dragons instantly tied Yifan up and hung him up. At this time, Yifan's arms were hanging, his legs were bound, and his body was wrapped 8 times by the golden chains. Whoosh! At this time, Gesang Dorj also began to make his move. He chanted a Buddhist mantra and then raised the golden Buddha bowl in his hand casually. Whoosh! The golden bowl flew straight up into the sky. When it flew 30 feet above Yifan's head, the golden bowl slowly stopped and then turned upside down with the bottom facing the sky and the mouth facing down. Buzz! Tens of thousands of golden rays shot down and formed a huge golden light shield, covering Yifan and the 8 extreme spell pillars in it. Frowning, Yifan lowered his head to look at the chains on his body and the 8 feet thick, huge magic pillar. He then raised his head to look at the golden Buddha treasure bowl that was shining with a golden light. He understood the other party's intention. Yifan in white was right. They had released him in advance to torture him. He tried to struggle, but in the end, he did not move at all. Now that his strength was sealed and his spiritual power was suppressed, he could not even use his 2 inner cores. He was no different from an ordinary person. Seeing Yifan trying to struggle, Di Kuan smiled smugly at Yifan and said, "We have specially set up the 8 gates golden lock spell formation on the 8 extreme spell pillars. Other than the 8 of us, no one can open it. You should save your energy." Is he the reincarnation of Eldritch? Tian Xin slowly walked to the front of the spell pillars and looked straight at Yifan with a pair of bright eyes as he asked Gusandoji. "That's right, that's him," Gusandoji said as he stepped in front of Yifan with a cold smile on his face. Tian Xin narrowed his eyes and his gaze turned cold. After hundreds of years, the Yin-Yang 8 had finally waited for this day. "Who are you people? Why are you making things difficult for me?" Yifan asked the 2 of them. "Ha ha ha!" Tian Xin laughed heartily. "Why? The famous Eldritch doesn't remember us, Yin Yang 8. You're so forgetful, aren't you? Yin Yang 8. Yi Fan, who was firmly trapped on the spell pillars, frowned. I don't know you. You don't know us. Di Kuan walked to Yi Fan with a sinister smile. Then I'll let you know us today. As Di Kuan spoke, he flung the snow-white horsetail whisk in his hand at Yi Fan. Whoosh, 5 feet long, dazzling golden arc of light shot out from the horsetail whisk in his hand and viciously struck Yi Fan's chest. Ever since he was killed by Eldritch in one move, Di Kuan had been suppressing his anger. Now that he had met his enemy, how could he let it go? Smack! There was a crisp sound as the golden arc of light from the horsetail whisk hit Yi Fan. However, what happened next left everyone dumbfounded. The moment the golden arc of light touched Yi Fan's body, it turned into specks of golden dust and fell to the ground. The scene in front of them made everyone look at each other in dismay. They didn't know what was going on. Yi Fan laughed coldly with disdain written all over his face. The 8 treasures robe on him was a treasure of the Devil Realm. It was invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire. What could a mere horsetail whisk do to him? Whoosh! Di Kuan was furious as he whipped the horsetail whisk toward Yi Fan again. He thought that Yi Fan would be torn apart by his previous move, but it was useless. It was a waste of energy. This time, he increased the strength of the horsetail whisk in his hand. Smack! There was an earth-shattering crisp sound as golden light danced in all directions. The result of this move was almost the same as the previous one, except that the sound was louder. There was no difference. Yi Fan's body did not have any bloodstains, not even a wrinkle on his clothes. Di Kuan was dumbfounded and stunned on the spot. This Eldritch was trapped by the Golden Buddha treasure bowl and the 8 extreme spell pillars. His power was suppressed, and his spiritual energy was ineffective. Why was he in such a situation? Ha ha ha! Yi Fan looked up and laughed. Is your horsetail whisk used to chase away mosquitoes? If you really can't do it, you can change to someone else. Don't embarrass yourself here. You. When Di Kuan heard Yi Fan's teasing, he was instantly enraged. Flustered and exasperated, he pulled out the double carp sword on his back and was about to stab Yi Fan. Second brother, don't be rash. Lei Jin of the 8 Yin Yang disciples pulled the furious Di Kuan back. Before they figure out the reason, they could not take the risk. Third brother, let go of me. Let me kill this bastard. Di Kuan raised his sword and roared loudly. Right now, he could not wait to eat this Eldritch alive and drink his blood and flesh. Just as everyone was trying to persuade Di Kuan, Tian Qian, who had been observing from the side, said, "Looks like the black robe on his body is not normal." When everyone heard that, they were enlightened. Di Kuan, who had been making a ruckus about killing Eldritch, immediately quieted down when he heard Tian Qian's words. Tian Qian was right. It was impossible for Eldritch, who had lost his magic power, to have such an ability. The black robe on Eldritch's body must be the culprit behind this. Master, you said that Eldritch has a secret treasure. Were you talking about this black robe? Tian Qian turned to look at Gesang Dorji and asked. Eldritch has a lot of secret treasures on him, Gesang Dorji said to Tian Qian. Not only does he have peerless godly weapons like the Frost Dragon Sword and the Flaming Sword, but he also has the 5 elements secret treasures like the Water Avoidance Pearl and the Flaming Stone. As for the black robe on this demon, it might be one of the secret treasures as well. Frost Dragon Flaming Sword? Tian Qian's eyes lit up when he heard that. These 2 swords were peerless godly weapons from ancient times. One of them was the head of cold air, while the other was the head of fire. He did not expect that these 2 godly weapons would be on Eldritch's reincarnation. 5 elements secret treasures? Di Kuan was overjoyed after hearing Gesang Dorji's words. He did not expect that the reincarnation of Eldritch would have such a thing on him. The remaining 6 of the 8 Yin Yang disciples were also overjoyed when they heard the news. They looked at each other. 2 godly weapons, 5 elements secret treasures, and an invulnerable robe on a young man's body. There were exactly 8 treasures. It was the will of the heavens that each of the 8 Yin Yang disciples could get one. If they could get these 8 treasures, together with the 8 extremes spell pillars and the 8 yin-yang extremes formation, the 8 yin-yang disciples would be invincible in the Jianghu. Gesang Dorji snorted when he saw the joy on the faces of the 8 yin-yang disciples. Although the 8 yin-yang disciples were skilled, they were still greedy. When they heard that Eldritch had secret treasures on him, they were like hungry wolves that saw sheep. Ahem! Tian Qian, who was the leader, coughed a few times when he saw the joy on the faces of the other 7 people. Tian Qian's coughs made the 7 people stop smiling. Grandmaster Gu Seng, Tian Qian said to Gu Seng Doji solemnly, "Since this evil creature has so many secret treasures on him, please use the golden Buddha treasure bowl to take him away. Otherwise, how are you going to punish him?" "You're right. I'll take away the secret treasures on this demon right away," Gesang Dorji said. "But I'm a Buddhist, so I don't know anything about these treasures. Since you all have excellent Taoist skills and are among the best in Haotian Taoism, why don't I leave these treasures to you? What do you think?" His purpose was to kill Eldritch with the help of others and avenge the loss of his arm in his previous life. As for the treasures on Eldritch, he was not interested in them at all. He might as well give them to the 8 yin-yang disciples as a favor. Gesang Dorji's words made the hearts of the 8 yin-yang disciples beat wildly. Before they could say anything, Gesang Dorji had taken the initiative to give the 8 treasures to them. I don't think this is a good idea." Tian Qian declined hypocritically. "This evil creature was captured by you, so the treasures should belong to you. I'm a Buddhist. The 4 elements are all empty, and there is no self in the 5 skandhas. How can I accept these worldly things?" Gesang Dorji said, "As the saying goes, a sword befits a hero. All of you are of virtue and prestige, and you care about all living beings. I'm relieved to leave these treasures in your care." Gesang Dorji's words made the 8 yin-yang disciples feel smug. "If that's the case, I'll accept it." Tian Qian cupped his hands and bowed to Gesang Dorji. "You're too polite." Gesang Dorji returned the gesture. Chapter 606. Whoosh! As Yi Fan was cursing, Di Kuan swung the horsetail whisk in his hand towards Yi Fan for the 3rd time. The golden arc of light appeared once again and went straight for Yi Fan. This time, he did not hit Yi Fan's body, but Yi Fan's face. "You have an impenetrable robe protecting you, but your face won't," Di Kuan thought to himself. Smack! A crisp sound was heard as the golden arc of light landed squarely on Yi Fan's face. On his fair and handsome face, there was a bloody wound that was lacerated, and his flesh was lacerated. Yi Fan's head was tilted to the left by the horsetail whisk, and he almost fainted. How is it? My horsetail whisk doesn't taste good, does it?" Di Kuan asked Yi Fan with a smug smile. Yi Fan, who was on the 8 extreme spell pillars, slowly turned his head and stared straight at Di Kuan. The corners of his mouth curled up, revealing his bloody teeth, and his expression was calm. "What? You're still not satisfied?" When Di Kuan saw that Yi Fan was not begging for mercy and was even smiling, he immediately sneered and said, "Then I'll reward you a few more times." As he spoke, he swung the horsetail whisk again, preparing to hit Yi Fan again. "Second brother, that's enough." Tian Qian reached out to grab the horsetail whisk in Di Kuan's hand and said, "Don't kill him. If he dies now, how can he participate in the demon expelling conference?" When Di Kuan heard Tian Qian's words, he slowly put down the horsetail whisk in his hand. "Then I'll let this evil creature live for another 7 days. After 7 days, I'll personally send you to heaven." Di Kuan sneered as he looked at Yi Fan, whose face was covered in bloody scars, and said, "Great Master Gesang, please." Tian Qian turned to Gesang Dorji and said, in other words, he wanted Gesang Dorji to use the golden Buddha treasure bowl to take the 8 treasures on Yi Fan and hand them over to the 8 yin-yang disciples. This way, not only would they be able to obtain the secret treasures on Eldritch's body, but they would also be able to make Eldritch suffer from the cold. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Gesang Dorji understood. He took a step forward and clasped his palms together. He raised his head and looked at the golden Buddha treasure bowl that was floating 30 feet above Yifan's head. He chanted a mantra and murmured incessantly. Buzz, as the incantation came out of Gesang Dorj's mouth, the golden Buddha treasure bowl floating in the air instantly shone brightly and began to spin. Whoosh! The 8 treasures jade embroidered robe on Yifan's body slowly separated from Yifan's body, following the golden pillar of light that hung down from the golden alms bowl. Immediately after, the frost dragon sword, leaf fire sword, water avoidance pearl, blazing firestone, and other treasures also flew towards the golden alms bowl along with the 8 treasure jade robe. Seeing that the treasure had left Eldritch's body, Gesang Dorj waved his sleeve and waved his hand. Shwa! The 5 elements secret treasures and the 8 treasures jade embroidered robe gradually separated from the golden alms bowl's pillar of light and slowly fell into Gesang Dorj's hands. Meanwhile, the frost dragon and leaf fire divine weapons hovered about 10 feet above Yifan's head, each emitting light and not moving at all. The frost dragon's sword shone with a dazzling silver light and a biting cold air, while the leaf fire sword shone with a dazzling red light and a rising heat. The 2 divine weapons, which had already gained sentience, swore to protect their master with their lives, using their own spiritual power to resist the golden Buddha treasure bowl above them. Tian Qian frowned when he saw this. Among the 8 great secret treasures, he was most proud of these 2 divine weapons. The other treasures did not catch his eye at all, but these 2 divine weapons were the only ones that had a problem. He looked at Gesang Dorj, his eyes full of anxiety. Gesang Dorj was also stunned by the scene in front of him. These 2 primordial divine weapons were indeed worthy of their reputation. They were actually loyal to their master in resisting the golden alms bowl's Buddhist power, even when their master had lost his cultivation base. These divine weapons were good divine weapons, but it was a pity that they had followed the wrong master. Gesang Dorj thought to himself, and his chanting suddenly sped up. Buzz! The golden Buddha treasure bowl, which was emitting tens of thousands of rays of golden light, shone brightly and spun faster. Roar! At this moment, a dragon's roar came from the frost dragon, sword floating in the air. Roar! A true dragon's roar also came from the leaf fire sword. Not only did the frost dragon and the frost dragon sword roar, but even the fire dragon and the leaf fire sword roared. The 2 dragons' roars made Yifan look up abruptly. He did not expect the fire dragon and the leaf fire sword to be unable to hold back. Gesang Dorj's expression changed when he saw this, and his pupils constricted instantly. He did not expect the 2 divine weapons to emit dragons' roars. Buzz! After the 2 dragons' roars, the 2 divine weapons shone brightly, and 2 pillars of light, one red and one silver, shot into the sky. Roar! Roar! The dragon's roars from the 2 divine weapons grew louder and louder, reaching the sky. There was a hint of pain in the dragon's roars. Frost dragon, leaf fire, don't try to be brave. In the wind and snow, Yifan, whose upper body was naked, looked up and shouted. He couldn't be more familiar with the personalities of these 2 divine weapons. They were now in a situation where their spiritual power was suppressed, and they were forcibly urging their spiritual power to resist the golden alms bowl's Buddhist power, which was why they were crying out in pain. If this continued, it was very likely that they would harm their own true spirits. Roar! Roar! The frost dragon sword and the leaf fire sword seemed to turn a deaf ear to Yifan's words. The light they emitted became brighter and brighter, and the dragon's roar was even more deafening. If you still recognize me as your master, then listen to me and don't force yourself anymore. Yifan's eyes were red as he shouted heartbreakingly. Otherwise, don't follow me in the future. He was a dignified living person. How could he let the 2 divine weapons stand up for him? Yifan's words caused the brilliance of the 2 divine weapons to decrease, and the dragon's roar also began to disappear slowly. Whoosh! The 2 divine weapons were instantly sucked into the golden alms bowl. Phew! Seeing the divine weapons being sucked into the golden alms bowl, Gesang Dorj heaved a sigh of relief. It was rumored that these two divine weapons had extremely strong spiritual power, but they were both sealed by experts. If not, with his current cultivation, he might really be suppressed by these two divine weapons. Seeing that the divine weapons were not in his hands, Tian Qian's face was a little ugly. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Yi Fan. Then, he suddenly attacked and threw a palm strike at Yi Fan from a distance. Whoosh! A half-foot golden light palm appeared out of thin air and went straight for Yi Fan's chest. Smack! The golden light palm landed heavily on Yi Fan's chest. A huge bloody palm print immediately appeared on his chest. Puff! The tyrannical palm hit Yi Fan so hard that he spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fainted. It was obvious that Tian Qian did not want to kill him. Instead, he wanted to make him suffer so much that he would rather die. He lowered his head as blood flowed out of his mouth and dripped onto the base of the 8 extreme spell pillars. Tian Qian retracted his palm and looked at Yi Fan. Yi Fan forced himself to stay conscious and stubbornly raised his head. He continued to look at the 9 people in front of him with a smile. "You'd better kill me now. Otherwise, you'll regret it one day." Yi Fan swept his cold gaze across the crowd as he spoke. He wanted to provoke them into killing him. That way, his soul would definitely leave his body, and the black and white divine lords of the underworld would naturally arrive unexpectedly. No matter how bold this evil monk was, he would not dare to go against the divine lords of the underworld. The last time he died in the Lingyun cave of Phoenix Cry Mountain, he had heard the black and white impermanence tell him that his name was not in the book of life and death. This way, he would be free to return to the demonic world with his primordial spirit body. Once he regained the power of the heavenly demon, he could use the power of the blood demon to reconstruct a physical body. At that time, he could make a comeback and kill the 8 yin-yang masters first. Then, he would find a way to destroy the golden alms bowl in Gu Sang Doji's hands and kill him. Kill you? Humph! Wouldn't it be too easy for you to kill you now? Di Kuan sneered. "We'll first destroy your reputation and let your infamy spread far and wide. Then, we'll let you suffer all the pain of the world. Finally, we'll cut you into pieces and remove your flesh and bones, destroying both your body and soul. Only then can we, the 8 yin-yang masters, release the hatred in our hearts. As for regret, don't worry, we'll only regret not treating you well." As Di Kuan spoke, he slapped Yi Fan across the air. Slap! Yi Fan's head tilted as a blood-red palm print appeared on the other side of his face. He slowly turned his head again and looked at Di Kuan with empty eyes, as if he was looking at a dead person. "Enjoy the remaining 7 days." Di Kuan stared at Yi Fan and said with a smile, "You'll have a deep impression of it. The same goes for all of you. Enjoy the next few days." Yi Fan spat out a mouthful of blood and said coldly. Di Kuan sneered. "Masters, the wind and snow here are too heavy. You'd better follow this old monk back to the temple to rest." Gusang Doji said to the 8 yin-yang masters with a smile, "This old monk has prepared the best butter tea to entertain all of you." As he spoke, he looked up at Yi Fan, who was tied up and spitting out blood. His eyes were full of contempt. "Then, we'll have to trouble you, master." Tian Kun nodded to Gusang Doji, then turned to the remaining 7 people and said, "Let's go." The 7 people nodded and followed behind Tian Kun and Gusang Doji to the Sweet Dew Temple in the distance. Before they left, the 7 people each slapped Yi Fan across the air with a mocking expression. Yi Fan endured everything with a smile on his face and did not say a word. After everyone entered the Sweet Dew Temple, only the tall 8 extreme spell pillars, the dazzling golden Buddha treasure bowl, and a half-naked Yi Fan were left on the spacious grounds. It was already past noon. The wind was bitterly cold and snow was falling. The bone-chilling wind rolled up large snowflakes and whipped Yi Fan like knives cutting his skin. Cough, cough, cough. Yi Fan coughed violently and spat out a large mouthful of blood. His body was no different from an ordinary person's now. The torture of the 8 yin-yang masters had severely damaged his body, especially the slap that Tion Kun gave him across the air. It had almost destroyed his internal organs. Even so, he still felt very fortunate. Fortunately, Xiao Zhao did not come with him. Fortunately, Akatsuki was not with him. Fortunately, Yumoji had returned to the Devil Realm. Fortunately, the cold dragonly fire did not resist. Thinking that the three of them were not implicated by him this time, a smile appeared on Yifan's face. He was in danger, but he was not thinking about himself. Under the wind and snow, Yifan slowly closed his eyes. The only thing he could do now was to wait. Wait for the Devil Exorcism Conference 7 days later. Chapter 607. The blizzard howled for an entire night. In the blink of an eye, it was the next morning. That night, the half-naked Yifan had to endure the severe pain from his body, as well as the cold weather and the knife-like wind and snow. He had not eaten any rice or water, and his stomach was rumbling with hunger, and his mouth was dry. His originally moist lips had become bloodless due to the loss of moisture and the cold wind of the night. His lips curled up like cracked earth. At this time, his face was bloodless, and the ghastly wound on his face had become a bloody mess, with blood clots clotting. His naked upper body was covered with bloody scars, and it was a ghastly sight. That night, the 8 Yin-Yang masters would take advantage of the time to go out and check if he had escaped. They would whip him a few times, and at the same time, humiliate and abuse him. In the face of the 8 people's insults and abuse, Yifan had been holding his head high with a smile on his face. He clenched his teeth and did not make a sound. It was not until the dawn of the sky that he fell into a deep sleep. At this time, his arms were hanging and tied up. His head was lowered, and his silver hair completely covered his face, gently fluttering in the cold wind. Creak! The door of the sweet Dew Temple slowly opened. Gasandoge, dressed in a monk's robe, slowly came out of the temple with a big bowl of steaming white rice porridge. He closed the temple door with a backhand, then stepped on the thick snow and came to Yifan. Looking at Yifan's body, full of whip scars and the blood-stained snow under his feet, Gasandoge's face showed a smile as if he had gotten his revenge. It was really the reincarnation of heaven. The arrogant and unruly eldritch in the past also ended up in such a miserable state today. Serve him right, Gasandoge thought as he stood with one palm and silently chanted a mantra, fiercely urging the golden Buddha treasure bowl suspended above Yifan's head. Buzz! Under his urging, the golden Buddha treasure bowl instantly shone with golden light. Ugh! Ugh! Yifan, who was sleeping with his head down, immediately let out a painful groan. Mr. Eldritch, it's time to eat. Gasandoge put down his hand and said with a smile. Yifan slowly opened his eyes and raised his head to look at Gasang Doj. It seems that Sir had a good night's sleep. Huh? Ha ha ha. Gasang Dogi looked at Yifan's bloodshot eyes and mocked. With those 8 dogs guarding me, of course I slept well. Yifan, whose lips were cracked, stared at Gasang Dorje with a smile and asked, Why? Is it your turn, master? Gasang Doji snorted coldly. My Buddha is merciful. This old monk couldn't bear to see Mr. starve, so I cooked a bowl of hot porridge for Mr. to warm him up. Gasang Dorje sneered as he stepped onto the steps of the octagon pillars and stood in front of Yifan. Yifan frowned. What the hell is this evil monk doing? Is he trying to poison me? Come, let this old monk feed Mr. Gasang Dorje smiled as he scooped up a spoonful of hot porridge from the bowl with a wooden spoon and handed it to Yifan. Yifan looked at Gasang Dorje coldly and didn't move. Why? Are you afraid it's poisonous? Gasang Dorje asked with a smile when he saw that Yifan wasn't eating. Yifan didn't speak and continued to stare at Gasang Dorje. Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily, Gasang Dorje said with a smile. I have to keep you alive until the day of the demon slaying conference. Before that, no one can take your life, including the 8 Yin-Yang masters. If you want to survive these few days, you have to eat something, understand? What enmity did I have with you in my previous life? Tell me about it. Yifan asked Gasang Dorje coldly. Since you asked, I'll let you know before you die, Gesang Dorj said as he put the spoon of porridge back into the bowl and lowered his head to stir it gently. To put it simply, you took the lives of the 8 yin-yang masters in your previous life. They didn't live long enough, so they reincarnated as humans in this life to take revenge on you. As for me, Gesang Dorj said as he raised his head and sneered, revenge for my broken arm. At the mention of his arm being torn off by this man in front of him, Gesang Dorj was furious. Come, let this old monk feed Mr. some porridge. Gesang Dorj said as he suddenly slammed the bowl of porridge in his hand on Yi Fan's face. The hot porridge scalded Yi Fan and made him scream loudly. Eat, ha! Gesang Dorj kept wiping the porridge bowl on Yi Fan's face as he laughed crazily. Yi Fan, who was pressed down by the hot porridge bowl, twisted his head wildly and let out a muffled scream. Crack! Under Yi Fan's violent shaking, the porridge bowl fell on the base of the 8 extreme spell pillars and broke into pieces. At this time, his face was covered with sticky, hot porridge, and the dense blisters on his skin under the hot porridge made one's scalp tingle. It was unbearable to look at him directly. The originally handsome and chiseled face instantly turned into a horribly ugly face full of blisters. Ha! Ha ha ha! Gesang Dorj looked up to the sky and laughed, his face distorted. Mr. Eldritch, I'm really sorry. This old monk is old, and my hands are a little unstable. Please don't take offense, but it doesn't matter. Just treat it as me washing your face, ha. Gesang Dorj laughed loudly, turned around, and walked down the stairs. Yi Fan wriggled his body crazily and howled like a beast. Clatter, clatter. The 8 golden dragons turned into golden chains and rattled as he shook them. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Yi Fan looked up to the sky and roared. But the only answer he got was the whistling of the wind and the heavy snow falling from the sky. 3 days passed quickly, and there were less than 4 days left before the Demon Extermination Conference. In these 3 days, more than 100 people came to the Sweet Dew Temple. Among the nearly 100 people, there were all kinds of people. There were humans and ghosts, mountain spirits and wild monsters, demons and monsters, and there were all kinds of people. These men and women, old and young, who came to the Sweet Dew Temple, were all taught a lesson by Eldritch in the past, without exception. Some of them were killed by Eldritch and reincarnated. Some of them endured humiliation to survive and refine their souls. In short, they all came to kill Eldritch. The small Sweet Dew Temple suddenly became lively. The originally tranquil and untainted ancient temple instantly became a foul atmosphere. Gesang Dorj never refused these people who came to the temple. As long as they came to take revenge on Eldritch, he would accept them all. To be honest, the number of people who came really surprised him. He didn't expect Eldritch to have so many enemies. Eldritch, you only have yourself to blame, and you can't blame others. Even if this old monk doesn't teach you a lesson, so many enemies won't let you go. Gesang Dorj thought in his heart. The 8 yin-yang masters were also surprised. They originally thought that there wouldn't be so many people. After all, many of those who were killed by Eldritch in the past had already entered the cycle of reincarnation and their memories were all gone. But they never expected that so many mountain spirits and wild monsters still remembered the old grudges of the past and gathered here to take revenge. After these enemies of the past saw Yi Fan tied to the 8 extreme spell pillars, without exception, they all left marks on him. Some used sharp blades to carve bloody words on Yi Fan's body and wrote the word retribution. Some used fiery red charcoal to burn Yi Fan, leaving scars on his body, and some released poisonous scorpions to bite Yi Fan, making his body red and swollen. Some even directly took out salt from the kitchen of the Sweet Dew Temple and specially sprinkled it on Yi Fan's wounds. It could be said that they were unscrupulous. In the face of all this, Yi Fan silently endured it. He had developed a habit now. Whenever the other party tortured him, he would close his eyes and recall the people he cared about and the people he cared about. His wife Fujiwara no Chiko, who had helped him in times of need. His adopted sister Xiao Zhao, who was affectionate and righteous, who never left him. Akatsuki, who risked her life to save him without asking for anything in return. Yumoji, who was deeply in love and devoted to him. Yifeshua, who had a fierce personality and cared for him in every way. His brother Kim, who valued friendship and righteousness. The cold-looking Yiming, who was indifferent to him. The indifferent Shui Ziwen. The profound Qing Chenzi, the amiable Jin Chan, and his father, Yi Kong, and grandfather, Yi Yun, whom he missed day and night. Only when he thought of these people did he feel less painful. Other than that, he also did one more thing, and that was to remember everyone who had tortured and cursed him. He remembered the other party's appearance and the vicious methods they had used on him. He remembered all of them in his mind. He wanted to live. He wanted to live. When he broke through the shackles and soared into the sky, it would be the time when these people's bodies and souls would be destroyed and their souls would be scattered. Soon it was nighttime. After the last round of torture on Yi Fan, everyone returned to the temple to rest with complacent faces. When they were attacking Yi Fan, Geseng Dorji and the 8 masters of Yin and Yang were watching coldly. On the one hand, they enjoyed Yi Fan's painful struggle to vent the hatred in their hearts. On the other hand, they stared at them and prevented them from killing Yi Fan to ensure the smooth progress of the demon-slaying conference. After everyone left, Yi Fan lowered his head that had been held high all day. At this time, his face was full of blisters, scarlet and horrible. There was no intact skin on his body. It was either red or swollen or blood or pus, except for one place. That was the crescent moon mark on his back. Every time those people used their methods to touch the crescent moon mark on his back, all their methods would be ineffective. Even the poisonous scorpions and poisonous insects did not dare to approach this place. Yi Fan did not know about this situation, and the others did not care either. As long as they could kill Eldritch, it was fine. Who cared so much? Yi Fan, who had not eaten anything for a few days, was now on the verge of death. His whole body was in pain. In the past 3 days, other than being forced to eat a few mouthfuls of snow, he had nothing else. Groggy, he was about to fall asleep. Only when he was asleep could he temporarily forget the pain. Only when he was asleep could he dream of seeing his wife, whom he longed for day and night. Mr. Eldritch, just as Yi Fan was about to fall asleep, a middle-aged man's voice came into his ears. Yi Fan thought it was his illusion and did not pay attention to it. Everyone here were his enemies from his previous life. How could anyone call him Mr. in such a soft and gentle manner? Mr. Eldritch, the voice continued. It seemed that it was not an illusion, Yi Fan thought. Someone was indeed calling his name. Chapter 608. Under the cold moonlight, a young man floated down from the opposite mountain peak and slowly landed in front of Yi Fan. This person looked to be in his 20s and wore a robe made of black cloth. He had a dignified appearance and a tall and straight posture. After landing in front of Yi Fan, the young man looked at Yi Fan with a calm expression. If you want to beat me or scold me, do as you please. Yi Fan looked at the young man in front of him and said weakly, "But please hurry up, I'm sleepy." Who else would come looking for him at this time other than his enemy from his previous life? "I'm not your enemy," the young man in the robe said. "You're not my enemy? Then who are you?" When Yi Fan heard this, he forced himself to focus and asked, "I'm the mountain god of Mount Everest." The young man replied, "Mountain god? You're the mountain god of Mount Everest?" Yi Fan's voice was full of surprise. He did not expect the mountain god to appear at this time. The young man nodded slowly. "Cough, cough. May I know why your eminence is here?" Yi Fan asked while coughing violently. "I've met you once 500 years ago. To be more specific, we could be considered old friends." The young man spoke to Yi Fan. "Now that you've met with misfortune here, I really can't bear to see you starve and suffer from the cold, so I've specially come to bring you some food." As the young man spoke, he stretched out his hand into the void. Whoosh! A stone tray appeared in his hand out of thin air. On the tray, there was a large bowl of white rice, 2 plates of vegetables, a pot of water, a jar of strong liquor, and a pair of bamboo chopsticks. I met your eminence in my previous life? Yi Fan asked with a frown. That's right. The young man replied calmly. What proof do you have? Yi Fan looked at the young man and asked. He had lost all of his spiritual energy, so his five senses were no different from ordinary people. He had no way of knowing whether the person in front of him was a god or a demon, a human or a ghost. What if the other party purposely tricked him and then poisoned the food to lure him into taking it? Wouldn't he die? Thinking of this, he went straight to the point and asked the young man who claimed to be the mountain god of Mount Everest. His idea was not impossible. Now in this sweet dew temple, hundreds of old enemies from his previous life hated him so much that they couldn't wait to swallow him alive. Although Gusang Doji and the 8 Yin-Yang masters had already made it clear that no one was allowed to take his life before the demon-slaying conference, it was hard to guarantee that there would be people who were unwilling to give up and wanted to kill him personally. The man smiled and slowly placed the dishes on the ground. Then, he picked up the small jar of liquor on the tray and broke the yellow seal with a snap. He placed it directly in front of Yi Fan. Come and smell it. This is the proof, the man said to Yi Fan with a smile. Yi Fan frowned, not understanding what the other party meant. What could a jar of wine prove? However, just as he was filled with suspicion, the rich aroma of wine drifted into his nose. The mellow aroma of the wine assailed the nostrils, and it also exuded a refreshing floral fragrance. It was the 100 flowers drunk, that he brewed in his previous life. Yi Fan was instantly shocked. How is it? Do you believe me now? The young man asked Yi Fan with a smile. How do you have my 100 flowers drunk? Yi Fan asked in surprise. Warm up first. Drink and talk. The man said as he placed the jar of wine next to Yi Fan's mouth and fed him. Yi Fan, who had endured the extreme cold, looked at the young man and then lowered his head to look at the 100 blossom drunk in his hand. After thinking for a moment, he opened his cracked lips and gulped down the drink. The other party had the 100 flowers drunk that he brewed in his previous life, so he shouldn't be lying to him. Drink slowly. This jar of wine is all yours. The young man looked at Yi Fan drinking crazily and said with a smile, Huff, huff. Yi Fan drank half a jar in a row before he stopped, panting heavily. You haven't eaten rice in a few days. Come eat something, the man said as he put down the jar of wine and picked up the steaming hot rice. Then he picked up some vegetables with his bamboo chopsticks and placed them in front of Yi Fan. Come, eat it while it's hot. The young man looked at Yi Fan and used his chopsticks to pick up a ball of food and placed it next to Yi Fan's mouth. Yi Fan opened his mouth and ate the food that the man fed him. After not eating a drop of water and rice for a few days, he once again felt the sweetness of the rice. Although it was just an ordinary meal that couldn't be any more ordinary, he felt as if it was a lifetime ago. In the past few days, he had faced punches and kicks, torture and insults. No one treated him as a human. Now that someone was feeding him, he had mixed feelings. He ate the food that the young man fed him with big mouthfuls. His eyes were filled with tears. Eldritch, didn't only have enemies. He also had friends. In order to not let the other party see the tears in his eyes, Yi Fan deliberately closed his eyes and ate the rice. But the result was the opposite. The more he closed his eyes, the more tears flowed out. In the face of torture and whipping, he didn't make a sound. But in the face of this bowl of white rice, he, a man who had already married, shed hot tears. Big drops of tears flowed down Yi Fan's blistered cheeks and fell into the bowl. Yi Fan didn't care about this and continued to gulp down the food. I'm a mountain god here. I can only eat vegetables. This bowl of vegetarian food is hard on you, the young man said as he used his sleeve to wipe the rice stuck to Yi Fan's mouth. Yi Fan slowly shook his head as he chewed. Yi Fan will never forget the kindness of the venerable god. Yi Fan said to the young man with red eyes as he chewed. There's no need for kindness. You don't have to call me the venerable god. I'm just a mountain watcher. There's no such thing as respect. You could just call me Brother Mountain. The middle-aged man smiled as he fed Yi Fan. Back then, you and I had similar temperaments. If I hadn't died young, maybe we could have become sworn brothers. Died young? Yi Fan frowned and asked the middle-aged man. Yes, I died young. Otherwise, would I be like this now? The young man smiled and said, "In other places, the mountain gods and earth gods are all old men with white hair and youthful faces. Only I am handsome and elegant. At first glance, you would think that I am an immortal from heaven. In fact, I am just a small leader who looks after the mountains. I just look like a bluff." The young man's words made Yi Fan, whose mouth was full of food, smile. This mountain god was indeed like what he said. His temperament was very similar to his own. Even his tone of voice was not much different. A big bowl of rice and 2 servings of vegetables were quickly devoured by Yi Fan like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. "Come, drink some more wine. You still have a few days of hardship ahead of you," the young man said, and once again picked up the wine jar to feed Yi Fan. "You appeared so suddenly. Aren't you afraid that they will come and find trouble with you?" Yi Fan asked after drinking a few mouthfuls of the 100-blossom wine. Obviously, that he was talking about were the mountain spirits and monsters in the Sweet Dew Temple. "Don't worry about that." The young man waved his hand and smiled. "Although my position is not high, I am still a god appointed by the Heavenly Emperor. Those motley crew, even if you lend them some courage, they won't dare to do anything to me. Speaking of which, with their little cultivation, I really don't care about them at all. You, on the other hand, were born with evil chi and have fallen into the devil path. They can torture you however they want without fear." Yi Fan smiled and did not reply. "What do you plan to do next?" the young man asked. "Look at me now. What else can I do?" Yi Fan looked down at the huge chains wrapped around his body and said self-deprecatingly, "Sigh." The young man sighed. "Can you break the chains on my body and save me from this octopole spell pillar?" Yi Fan asked the young man. "If I could save you, I would have done it long ago. Why would I wait until now?" The young man smiled bitterly and shook his head. Yi Fan frowned after hearing this. "These 10 days of suffering are your predestined fate. Even if the Daoyuo, celestial being descended to this world, he would be powerless, not to mention a mere mountain god like me. Even this time when I came to deliver you food, I came quietly, not daring to make it public." The young man sighed. "To tell you the truth, you will suffer more in the next 4 days than you are now. All of this is because you were too ruthless in your previous life. You even took the lives of many people who had not yet reached the end of their lives. So in this life, you should repay them. In that case, I won't be able to escape death in the devil-slaying conference in 4 days." Yi Fan said with a frown. "That's not necessarily true." When the young man heard Yi Fan's words, he immediately revealed a mysterious smile. As the saying goes, misfortune is where fortune lies, and misfortune hides. Extreme misfortune leads to extreme happiness. Things will always move in the opposite direction. You are the Eldritch who fought against the 6 immortals without losing a single battle. So many disasters didn't kill you. Even the underworld didn't take your soul. This time, it won't be easy for them to kill you. Speaking of which, letting you die is too easy for you. It's different this time." Yi Fan shook his head. "I have no cultivation now, and I'm seriously injured. Any normal person can take my life, let alone these demons and ghosts. You were really smart your whole life, but stupid this time." The young man smiled. "Why don't you think about it? In your previous life, you hated evil and were ruthless, but you also made a lot of good karma and accumulated a lot of good karma. Yes, you made a lot of enemies, but on the other hand, you also made a lot of friends. On the day of the devil-slaying conference, how can you be sure that your friends from your previous life won't gather here?" When Yi Fan heard this, his heart was filled with shock. He was right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The more enemies I have, the more friends I have. How could he have forgotten about this? Taking 10,000 steps back, let's not talk about your previous life. Let's talk about this life. The young man smiled. "Don't you have a lot of friends? In the devil-slaying conference in 4 days, will they stand by and do nothing? But if that's the case, why don't they show up now?" Yi Fan frowned and asked the young man. "Now, other than you, only evil people will come. Did those Yin-Yang 8 disciples break your head? Don't you understand this?" The young man smiled and said, "Didn't I tell you just now? These 10 days of suffering are destined to be a calamity. No matter who comes, it's useless. What are they doing here now? Are they just going to watch you suffer? Or are they going to interfere with karma and eliminate all the motley crew? As the saying goes, it's not that they don't want to repay you. It's just that the time has not come for you to get rid of your suffering. Naturally, everything will go on as usual. Yifan suddenly understood and slowly nodded. It's getting late. I should go back. The young man bent over and picked up the tray. He said to Yifan, "These few days are the days you have to pay your debts. Bear with it." Chapter 609. In the blink of an eye, it was the 9th day. It was less than a day before the demon slaying conference. At this time, the number of people who came to Feishue Peak's Sweet Dew Temple had reached more than 300. Just like before, all of them were Yi Fan's enemies. At this time, Geseng Duji also received news from all sides that in the demon slaying conference 3 days later, various sects would send people to participate. At that time, the number of people would reach nearly 1,000. After receiving the news, Geseng Duji was overjoyed. The more people who came, the better. The more people who came, the worse Eldritch reputation would be, and he and his Sweet Dew Temple would be famous all over the world. On one hand, he ordered the monks in the temple to clean the conference venue and prepare a large number of tables, chairs, tea, and fruits. On the other hand, he asked the 8 Yin-Yang disciples to arrange the conference. No matter what, the 8 Yin-Yang disciples were all powerful figures back in the day. They had participated in and organized various large-scale spiritual gatherings and were very experienced in organizing large-scale spiritual gatherings. It could be said that they were the most suitable to organize this unparalleled demon-slaying conference. For a time, Feishue Peak became lively. The open space was cleaned, tables and chairs were placed, the prayer flags were set up, the entrance of the conference hall was set up, the guest registration book was prepared, and several temporary latrines were even built in the open space not far from the conference hall. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. In the wind and snow, half-naked Yifan, who was tied with a huge chain, looked at everything around him coldly. He was like a statue, motionless. 3 days had passed since the Mount Everest mountain god left. In these 3 days, Yifan did not eat a grain of rice, nor did he drink a drop of water. Even the snow was not stuffed into his mouth. But for some reason, Yifan did not feel hungry or thirsty at all. On the contrary, he felt that his stomach was full, his mouth was moist, and he was full of energy. He vaguely felt that the date that the young Mount Everest mountain god stuffed into his mouth before leaving was not an ordinary thing. Yifan was right. That date was indeed not an ordinary thing. This thing was called the fiery sun jujube. It was born by absorbing the essence of the plants in the mountains and rivers. It was an extremely rare thing in the world. If an ordinary person consumed it, although it couldn't make them immortal, it could still strengthen their body and prolong their life. Apart from that, there was another unique characteristic of this item, and that was that after consuming a single jujube, one would not feel hungry or thirsty for half a year. That young man was the mountain god of Mount Everest, who was known as the king of mountains. It was not unusual for him to have such a thing. It was also because of this that Yifan didn't feel hungry or thirsty. Even so, the injuries on his body were getting worse and worse. As the number of enemies continued to increase, more and more forms of torture appeared on his body. It could be said that before the old wounds were healed, new wounds were added. The purple ones were bruises, the blue ones were frostbites, the red ones were blood, and the green ones were poisonous sores. Although he was topless at this moment, from afar, he looked like he was wearing a colorful robe. With disheveled hair, he endured all the pain and waited for the arrival of the final day. When the sky gradually darkened, the people who had been busy all day returned to the Sweet Dew Temple. At this time, the tables and chairs were neatly arranged in a circle. Scripture banners were fluttering, and Dharma flags were flying. On a high ground not far from Yifan, there was a huge flagpole that was nearly 10 feet tall, with a large golden flag hanging on it. The golden flag was 7 feet long, fluttering in the wind, and there were 4 large black words written on it: demon-killing conference. What was supposed to come was finally coming. He didn't know if he would still be able to see such a beautiful moon tomorrow. Looking at the bright crescent moon in Yikong's sky, Yifan thought in his heart, there were only two results tomorrow. Either he would break free and regain his freedom, or his body and soul would be destroyed, and his soul would scatter. No matter what the result was, he was prepared. If he could survive, he would continue to search for the cauldron and rescue his beloved wife's soul that was trapped in the soul-gathering evil cauldron. Of course, before that, he would make his past life's enemies pay a painful price. If he couldn't survive, he had no regrets. Now, no matter what, Chico had come back to life. Although she was a little crazy, it was much better than lying in an ice coffin, neither alive nor dead. Once his body and soul were destroyed, his wife's soul would be useless to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, and it was very likely that he would release her. In that case, things would be simpler. The crown prince would have pardoned the world, and the Yi family would have their grievances cleared. His father and the others would no longer have to wander around and live in hiding. As for Xiao Zhao, Nieching would definitely find a way to restore her human body. With him and Jin Shan taking care of her, Xiao Zhao would have a stable life for the rest of her life. Akatsuki would probably return to Dongying. Once he died, her heart would definitely be dead. However, time was the best medicine. Many years later, she would probably have her own family, take care of her husband and children, and enjoy life. Once something happened to him, Yumoji would definitely be heartbroken and grief-stricken. With her personality, she would definitely leave the demonic world and reincarnate as a human. Reincarnating as a human was actually not bad. Just like what she said back then, living a simple life, working at sunrise and resting at sunset. She would forget about her previous life and be an ordinary person who couldn't be any more ordinary. It was quite good. Creak. While Yifan was thinking, the temple door slowly opened. The 8 yin-yang masters in black cloaks and Gesang Doji in llama robes walked out of the Ganlu temple in single file and walked toward him. Gesang Doji, who was in the lead, had a smile on his face as his eyes narrowed. Tian Qian, who was following behind him, had a smile on his face as he carried a food box in his hand. The remaining 7 people had smug looks on their faces, and they were extremely arrogant. The 9 of them soon arrived in front of Yifan and stood still. Yifan looked at the 9 people with a calm gaze. Eldritch, you'll be on your way tomorrow. Tonight's meal will be your last. Eat up. As Tian Qian spoke, he slowly walked up the steps of the 8 extreme spell pillars. He placed the food box at Yifan's feet and reached out to open the lid. The food in the food box was quite sumptuous. There was a flask of white wine, a fat chicken, a grilled fish, a few steamed buns, and a bowl and chopsticks. After Tian Qian finished speaking, he turned around and walked down the steps. As he walked down the steps, Tian Qian secretly formed hand seals with his hands under his sleeves. Clatter. The 2 golden chains wrapped around Yifan's arms slowly withdrew, and Yifan's arms immediately dropped to his sides. Although his arms had regained their freedom, they had been hung for 9 days after all. His blood vessels were already numb, and he could not feel anything. Eat up, don't be a hungry ghost, Tian Qian, who had walked down the steps, turned around and looked at Yifan's dangling arms and said with a smile, Be a ghost? He. Does he have the fortune to do so? Di Kuan sneered at Yifan and said, During the demon-slaying conference tomorrow, I'll first destroy your physical body, then destroy your soul, so that you can't even be a ghost. After hearing this, everyone smiled. Yifan stared coldly at Di Kuan, who was mocking him, with a gaze as sharp as a knife. Look, I'll show you. When Di Kuan saw Yifan staring at him, he immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. He swung the horsetail whisk in his hand and infused it with his spiritual energy. Buzz, under the infusing of his spiritual energy, the foot-long, smooth, and soft horsetail whisk in his hand instantly flashed with a golden light. Each strand of the horsetail whisk stood upright like 10,000 steel needles. Whoosh! Di Kuan used the straight horsetail whisk in his hand to stab Yifan's eyes. Puff! Following the sound of eyeballs bursting, countless steel needle-like horsetail whisk pierced Yi Fan's eyes. Dark red blood instantly stained the snow-white horsetail whisk. Ah! Yi Fan screamed in agony. Puff! Di Kuan pulled the horsetail whisk out from Yi Fan's eyes. The tip of the horsetail whisk was stained with sticky blood. Ah! Ah! Yi Fan screamed in agony. Instinctively, he wanted to cover his eyes with both hands. However, because his arms had been hanging for too long, they had already lost all feeling. At this time, his eyes had been pierced. His clear and handsome eyes had instantly become two bloody holes. Di Kuan swung the blood on his horsetail whisk and smiled maliciously. The remaining 7 people, including Gusang Doji, looked at each other and smiled. To them, Yi Fan's screams were simply like music to their ears. Roar, roar! At this moment, the golden Buddha bowl floating above Yi Fan's head suddenly shone with silver and red light. 2 deafening dragon roars were heard. The dragon roars were filled with sorrow. The sound was so loud that the gravel under everyone's feet trembled. When the 2 divine weapons in the golden bowl saw that their master's eyes were destroyed, they were furious and couldn't bear it anymore. This scene made the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, who were smiling just now, take a few steps back. Their expressions changed drastically, especially Di Kuan, who was so frightened by the sudden dragon roar that his face turned pale and he almost fell down. Han Long, Li Hua, don't act recklessly. Yi Fan, who was in so much pain, said in a trembling voice as he endured the pain in his eyes. He couldn't let Han Long's Li Hua hurt his true spirit. Because of him, Master, quickly cast a spell and seal them. Quick, quick! Di Kuan, who was still in shock, said to Gusang Doji anxiously as he looked nervously at the silver and red golden bowl in the air. Gusang Doji, who had recovered from his shock, immediately put his palms together and closed his eyes. Then, he started to chant a mantra. Buzz? The golden bowl suddenly shone with golden light, and its brilliance skyrocketed. Roar! Roar! The dragon's roar turned into a sorrowful cry. Along with the sorrowful cry, the dazzling silver and red brilliance became more and more intense. It was as if the dragon was about to break out of the bowl. The golden bowl, on the other hand, gradually swelled up under the brilliance of the 2 divine weapons and doubled in size. They wanted to burn together with the golden bowl. Yi Fan felt Han Long's, Li Hua's intention. Gusang Doji was sweating profusely as he chanted the mantra in a hurry. At this moment, he didn't dare to be careless. He activated the golden bowl with all his strength. If Han Long's Li Hua broke out of the bowl, there was only one outcome for them, death. Han Long, Li Hua. Yi Fan, whose eyes were bloodshot, raised his head and roared in a hoarse voice. Go back. Without my permission, you're not allowed to come out. Otherwise, I'll bite my tongue and commit suicide. I'll die in front of you too. Roar. The silver and red brilliance gradually faded away. The sorrowful dragon's roar also gradually quieted down. The golden bowl was restored to its original state. Everyone's hearts, which were in their throats, also fell to the ground. Yi Fan's tense nerves relaxed. Coupled with the unbearable pain, he immediately fainted. Master, no matter what, we can't let those 2 divine weapons break out of the bowl. Tianqian turned to look at Gusang Doji and said solemnly, These 2 divine weapons have seals on them. For the time being, they can't restrain the golden Buddha treasure bowl. I'm worried about him, Gusang Doji said as he looked at Yi Fan. What do you mean, Master? Tianqian asked with a frown. When the golden Buddha treasured bowl restrains the 2 divine weapons, the power suppressing this evil creature will be reduced. I'm afraid that during the meeting tomorrow, the divine weapons will cause trouble and this evil creature will take the opportunity to escape, Gusang Doji said. Don't worry, Master. With the octopole spell pillars, this evil creature won't be able to escape, Tianqian said. It's better to be safe than sorry, Gusang Doji said with a frown. This? Tianqian frowned. That's easy, Di Kuan said through gritted teeth. We'll cut off his arms and break his tendons. This way, even if the two divine weapons break out of the bowl, what can we do? We have more than 300 experts. Can't we deal with those two sealed weapons? Gusang Doji nodded slowly. This was the best solution for him. In his previous life, Eldritch had torn off his arms. In this life, he would make him pay twice as much. What do you think, big brother? Dikuan turned to ask Tianxian. Tianxian glanced at the unconscious Yi Fan, who was bleeding profusely, and nodded slightly. Leave this to me. Dikuan pulled out the sword on his back with a grim smile and turned to walk toward Yi Fan. Whoosh, whoosh. A few sword shadows flashed past the unconscious Yi Fan's body. As a large amount of blood spurted out, Yi Fan's screams resounded through the valley. Thud, thud. Chapter 610. The 10th day. Early in the morning. According to the almanac, today was not a good day. Master, it's already the 10th day. Yi Fan is on the verge of death. If I go later, I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on. In the Three Pristines Temple, the little Taoist boy knelt in front of Qing Chenzi, who was meditating cross-legged, and said anxiously. Qing Chenzi, who was sitting on the futon, closed his eyes and looked calm. He turned a deaf ear to the little Taoist boy's words. Master, the little Taoist boy kowtowed heavily on the ground and said loudly, I beg you, let me go. When Yi Fan was taken away by Gusang Dorje with the golden alms bowl, he had already sensed that Yi Fan was in trouble. He could sense that Yi Fan was in trouble, let alone Qing Chenzi. However, Qing Chenzi didn't care about Yi Fan's trouble at all. It was as if he didn't know about it. After learning about the demon-slaying conference, the little Taoist boy couldn't hold it in anymore. He asked Qing Chenzi to go and rescue Yi Fan. However, he didn't expect that Qing Chenzi would flatly refuse his request. Although the little Taoist boy didn't understand why Qing Chenzi did this, he couldn't disobey his master's order. Since Qing Chenzi didn't agree, the little Taoist boy didn't dare to go out without permission. However, last night, the usually calm and dreamless little Taoist boy had a very realistic nightmare. He was so shocked that he suddenly sat up on the bed and sweated profusely. In the dream, Yi Fan was tied to a huge pillar with 8 golden chains around his body. His eyes were gone, his arms were broken, and his face was badly mutilated. He didn't even look like a human anymore. He looked straight at little Taoist boy with a pair of bloody holes and didn't say a word. After waking up, the little Taoist boy didn't have time to think. He calculated Yi Fan's situation according to the time of the dream. However, when he saw the result of the calculation, the Taoist boy's eyes turned red. Everything in the dream was real. He lifted the blanket, changed into a Taoist robe, and carried the sword on his back. He went straight to find Qing Chenzi. What surprised him was that Qing Chenzi, who was supposed to be resting in the bedroom, was not in the room. The bedding on the bed was neat and tidy, as if it had not been touched at all. He searched around the purple sun shrine and finally found Qing Chenzi, who was sitting cross-legged and reciting Tao scriptures in the brightly lit Three Purities Hall. The Taoist boy knelt down in front of Qing Chenzi without saying a word. To him, there was no need to say anything. Qing Chenzi already knew everything. No matter what he was doing, what he was thinking, even if it was just a fleeting thought, Qing Chenzi knew everything. The master and disciple duo sat cross-legged and recited the scriptures silently, while the other knelt on the ground and remained motionless until dawn. Seeing that the time of Yi Fan's execution was getting closer and closer, the Taoist boy could no longer hold it in, so he begged Qing Chenzi. Seeing the Taoist boy's sincere words, Qing Chenzi, who was meditating with his eyes closed, said calmly, It's not that I don't want you to go, but Yi Fan's 10 days of suffering are not over yet. If you go to rescue him now, you will not be able to hold back and attack him. In that case, you will only interfere with karma and will not benefit you. Today is the 10th day. Why do you say that his 10 days of suffering are not over yet? The kneeling Taoist boy heard his master speak and immediately asked, The time is not up yet. Qing Chenzi said, The time is not up yet? The Taoist boy asked in surprise, How much longer? Chinzi opened his eyes and slowly stood up. He took out 3 incense sticks from the incense holder on the table and lit them on the candlestick. Then he bowed to the statues of the 3 purities and inserted the incense sticks into the incense burner. When these incense sticks burn out, Yifan's 10 days of suffering will be over, Chinzi said as he turned around and walked to the Taoist boy. He reached out and helped him up. At that time, you can go and help him. Thank you, master. The Taoist boy suddenly understood and bowed to Chinzi. It was not that Chinzi did not want him to rescue Yifan, but he was afraid that he would be swayed by his emotions and interfere with karma, which would damage his merit. Remember, you're going to rescue him on behalf of the Purple Sun Temple. You should follow the rules of Tao. Do not act recklessly. Otherwise, I will not forgive you, Chinzi said as he removed the 5-colored jade token from his waist and handed it to the Taoist boy. Don't worry, master. I will remember. The Taoist boy took the Purple Sun Decree with both hands and said solemnly. Chinzi put his hands behind his back and slowly left the 3 Purities Temple. The Taoist boy kept the token and stared at the 3 incense sticks in the incense burner, hoping that the incense sticks would burn out as soon as possible. Sect Master, when are we leaving? In the Dojin Palace, Succubus, who was dressed in a black robe and had a delicate face, asked Chui Zuan, who was standing in front of the crystal window with his back facing her. It's not time yet. Chui Zuan, who was dressed in a black robe with golden threads, looked at the drizzle outside the window and said calmly. Succubus frowned after hearing this. Have you prepared the things I asked you to bring? Chui Zuan asked. Sect Master, I have brought the purple jade blood ointment that the king of Persia gave you and the 9 revolutions creation elixir that the state preceptor of Wu Peng country gave you. But Succubus stopped talking. But what? Chui Zuan asked. Aren't we going to rescue Yifan? Why do we have to bring these things? Succubus asked in confusion. She had gone out with Chui Zuan to run errands more than 10 times, but this was the first time she had brought the holy healing elixir with her. Yifan's injuries aren't light right now, so we'll need it later, Chui Zuan said. Yifan is injured. When the succubus heard Chui Zuan's words, her beautiful eyes immediately widened and she asked in shock. She only knew that Yifan had been restrained by a Tibetan Buddhist expert with a magical weapon and was about to execute him today. She didn't expect that Yifan was already seriously injured. In her opinion, the Buddhist expert was a benevolent and kind person, so they definitely wouldn't abuse their authority to punish. Yes, Chui Zuan responded. Is his injury serious? Is his life in danger? Succubus asked. His injury is very serious. Chui Zuan looked out of the window and said. Succubus' heart instantly sank. Chui Zuan always spoke casually, and no matter how serious the matter was, it was like child's play to him. Now, he had personally said that Yifan's injury was very serious, and his tone was very serious. He even paused for a moment. This could only mean one thing, and that was that Yifan's injury was very dangerous. Succubus' eyes reddened when she thought of how Yifan was willing to be humiliated in order to save her from Qiyao. When we see Yifan later, you're only responsible for treating his injuries. Don't interfere with anything else. Chui Zuan said to Succubus with his hands behind his back. We'll set off in 1 hour. Yes, sect leader. Succubus blinked and replied. In the open space of the Ganlu temple, the prayer flags fluttered and the Dharma flags fluttered. Yifan, who was tied to the 8 extreme Dharma pillars, had his head lowered. His dirty silver hair covered his face that was full of blisters and badly mangled flesh. On his shoulders, the bones and wounds that were neatly arranged were a ghastly sight that made one's scalp go numb. On the ground below the Dharma pillars, a large pool of scarlet blood had completely solidified and turned black. 2 ghastly white, severed arms were frozen on top of the blood clots. It was a sight that made one's heart tremble and unable to look straight at. Outside the venue, countless Tibetans who had heard the news and came to participate in the demon-slaying conference looked at Yifan from afar while pointing and whispering. A few of them were bold enough to pick up a few stones, and throw them at Yi Fan from afar. As they did so, they cursed Yi Fan in Tibetan. In their eyes, Yi Fan was a demon, a complete demon. It was a great blessing to be able to witness a demon being killed with their own eyes. Gesang Dorji and the 8 yin-yang masters who were sitting on the tall Dharma platform looked at the scene in front of them with a smile on their faces. They drank the steaming hot butter tea in their hands contentedly. Behind them, more than 300 enemies of Eldritch from his previous life were staring at Yi Fan with evil smiles on their faces. They were all holding weapons and staring at him on the Dharma pillars. They couldn't wait to pounce on him and tear him into pieces. Eldritch's eyes were destroyed, his arms were broken, his hamstrings were torn, his cultivation was lost, his treasures were stolen, and he was imprisoned. No matter how capable he was, the famous Eldritch was now a cripple. Not to mention these people, even if it was just a child, any one of the Tibetan onlookers would be able to take his life. Patter! A stone in the hand of a Tibetan hit Yi Fan on the head. Yi Fan, who had fainted, was gradually awakened by this blow. He slowly raised his head. His silver hair that was stuck together by pus and blood slowly separated, revealing his horrifying empty bloody eye sockets and his ugly face with pus and blood flowing out. Boom! The crowd let out a cry of alarm and suddenly retreated. After Yi Fan heard the voices of the crowd, he lowered his head again. He could no longer see anything. The cold air and the noisy crowd made Yi Fan understand that the demon-slaying conference was about to begin. I didn't expect him to be injured to this extent. In the crowd, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was wearing a felt hat and a Tibetan robe, whispered in surprise when he saw Yi Fan on the Dharma pillars. If it weren't for the silver hair, Matsumoto Takeyoshi almost couldn't recognize that this person was Yi Fan, who had already joined the demon path, and whose cultivation defied the heavens. The Han people have an old saying, a dragon in the shallows will be teased by shrimps. A tiger in the plains will be bullied by dogs. It seems that today is the day of his death. The tall Sasaki, who was holding a saber in his hand, whispered to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Beside him, Akichi Miyamoto frowned and didn't say anything. The three of them had carefully dressed up in order to participate in this demon-slaying conference. The tall Sasaki put on makeup to look like an old Tibetan with a hunched back and a face full of beard. He hid his huge and slender saber in a thick wooden crutch. Akichi Miyamoto, who was wearing a black heavy armor from head to toe, was wearing a loose Tibetan robe, a huge felt hat, and a scarf covering his face. He looked out through the gaps of the scarf. The state preceptor of this dynasty, Master Lu of Mao Mountain, has arrived. As the gatekeeper outside the venue shouted, Lu Yuanshan, who was wearing a golden Taoist robe, slowly walked in from outside the venue. With his left hand behind his back and his right arm raised, he walked toward the spell platform in high spirits. Behind him, the savage zombie king, who was wearing an apricot yellow Taoist robe, followed closely behind him with an expressionless face. Matsumoto Takeyoshi coldly looked at the arrogant Lu Yuanshan with a gloomy look in his eyes. As soon as he heard that the state preceptor of this dynasty had arrived, Gesang Dorji, who was sitting in the center of the spell platform, hurriedly left his seat and brought the 8 yin-yang disciples and the 300 eldritch enemies to Lu Yuanshan. This old monk, Gesang Dorji, greets the state preceptor. Gesang Dorji put his palms together and bowed to Lu Yuanshan. The 8 yin-yang disciples greet the state preceptor. The head of the 8 yin-yang disciples, Tian Qian, waved his horsetail whisk and bowed to Lu Yuanshan. They were all Taoists, so they naturally greeted him with Taoist etiquette. Asterisk clatter star. Chapter 6:11. I'm here today as the Maoshan sect leader. This has nothing to do with the imperial court, Lu Yuanshan said to the crowd with a smile. Master Gesang, please rise. Fellow Taoists, please rise. He was very pleased with the respect everyone was showing him. On the surface, he appeared to be modest and polite, but in reality, he was overjoyed and overjoyed. He only had one purpose in attending the demon-slaying conference, and that was to use this unprecedented spiritual conference to show his face. He wanted to let all the heroes and sects know that he was not only the Maoshan sect leader, but also the Imperial Court's Imperial Advisor. He was second only to one person. The Imperial Advisor is low-key and magnanimous. "I'm impressed," Gusang Duji said as he extended his hand toward the spiritual platform. "Please, Imperial Advisor." "Master, please." Lu Yuanshan smiled. The two of them walked side by side toward the spiritual platform as they spoke. The 8 Yin-Yang disciples and the 300 enemies automatically made way for them with respectful looks on their faces. Although Lu Yuanshan said that he was attending the spiritual conference as the Maoshan sect leader, his status as the Imperial Advisor was still respected. No one dared to be disrespectful. "Big brother, there seems to be something wrong with the person following behind Lu Yuanshan." The sharp-eyed Di Kuan rushed to Tian Qian's side and whispered into his ear. "I've already seen through what you said," Tian Qian said to Di Kuan as he looked at Lu Yuanshan and his disciple. "However, this has nothing to do with us. Our goal is to get rid of Eldritch. We don't care about anything else." Di Kuan nodded slowly. "Is this person the reincarnation of Eldritch?" Lu Yuanshan asked with a frown as he led the crowd to the 8 extreme spell pillars and looked at Yi Fan, who was tortured beyond recognition. The severity of the punishment the person in front of him had been subjected to made him slightly surprised. Sect Leader Lu is right. This person is the reincarnation of Eldritch, Gusang Duji replied. Lu Yuanshan raised his head and looked at the golden Buddha treasure bowl floating above Yi Fan's head. He then looked at the 8 extreme spell pillars behind Yi Fan and nodded slightly. No wonder they were able to capture this Eldritch. It turned out that they had the help of magic tools. Master's Dharma is superb. The people of Tibet can be said to be bathed in Buddha's grace, Lu Yuanshan said to Gusang Dorji with a smile. Sect Master Lu is too polite. Please come in. Gusang Doji continued to invite Lu Yuanshan inside. Lu Yuanshan smiled and followed Gusang Doji onto the 30 feet tall platform. After a series of pretentious excuses, Lu Yuanshan sat next to Gusang Doji. This was the Tibetan area. Almost everyone believed in Buddhism. The Dharma assembly was held in front of the Sweet Dew Temple. Although he was the great Ming state preceptor, he was still a Taoist after all. If he sat on the main seat, it would be unreasonable. Moreover, Eldritch was captured by Gusang Doji. Gusang Doji was the main character. While drinking the fragrant butter tea, he asked Gusang Dorji about the customs of the Tibetan people, pretending to be sympathetic to the people. After all, he was now the state preceptor of the Great Ming. His status was different from before. Gusang Doji answered carefully, not daring to neglect. The Savage Corpse King's incarnation, Dao Xian, stood quietly behind Lu Yuanshan, looking at Yi Fan on the 8 extreme spell pillars expressionlessly. He was the Millennial Corpse King. He had heard about Eldritch's incident. Looking at Yi Fan, who had lost all his cultivation and was tortured, he felt a little uncomfortable. To be honest, he admired what Eldritch had done in the past. He appreciated Eldritch's crazy and unruly character very much and sympathized with him. He had always wanted to meet Eldritch, but he never had a chance. When he was alive, he was deep in the wilderness, dealing with the affairs of the country, and had no time to spare. After he died, he turned into the Savage Corpse King and hid in the dark all day, living a life of savagery. It was even more impossible for him to meet Eldritch. Now, he finally met Eldritch, who was rumored to have heaven-defying strength, but he didn't expect to see him on such an occasion. He didn't expect that Eldritch, who even the immortals of the heaven realm couldn't do anything about back then, would fall into such a situation now. It really made him sigh. He had lost half of his corpse core and was living under someone else's roof. It was already hard enough, but compared to Eldritch, he was already living in happiness. That Lu Yuanshan, who let him come? In the crowd outside the venue, a young man dressed as a scholar frowned and asked an old man beside him. This person had a dignified appearance and looked like Buffon. Although he was disguised, he still couldn't hide his noble aura. He was none other than the current crown prince. Looking at Lu Yuanshan, who was sitting high on the ritual platform with a smug face, he was a little dissatisfied. Your Highness, you don't know. Although he is already the current imperial advisor, he is still the Maoshan sect leader, the old man dressed as a servant said. Spiritual gatherings like the Demon Slaying Conference have always been attended by the various sect leaders to show that they are subduing demons and promoting justice. This old man was the Crown Prince's special technique expert. On this trip to Tibet, he was in charge of the Crown Prince's daily life and personal guard. Where are our people? Has everything been arranged? The Crown Prince asked the old man in a low voice. Everything has been arranged, the old man replied. Gunpowder has been buried under the ground 100 feet around Yifan. More than 30 experts have all disguised themselves and are scattered in the crowd. As long as there is a chance, I will send out a secret signal to detonate the gunpowder and let them take advantage of the chaos to save him. The Crown Prince nodded slowly. Just as the Crown Prince and the old eunuch were discussing how to rescue Yifan, the gatekeeper at the door shouted, Zhang Xiaoyang, the sect leader of Zhengyi, and Yu Xingqian, the sect leader of Chuanjin, have arrived. Gesang Dorji, who was talking to Lu Yuanshan, heard that Zhang Xiaoyang of Longhu Mountain and Yu Xingqian of Chuanjin sect had arrived. He stood up again and went down the stairs to welcome them. The 8 Yin-Yang disciples followed closely behind. Zhengyi, Chuanjin, and Maoshan were known as the 3 major sects of Taoism, especially Zhengyi's sect, which was the leader of Taoism. Naturally, they didn't dare to slight them. Lu Yuanshan, who was sitting in his seat, narrowed his eyes and drank his tea quietly. According to the rules, he should also stand up to welcome them. After all, Zhengyi and Chuanjin's sect status in Taoism was higher than his Maoshan. However, that was all in the past. Now that he was the imperial preceptor, his status was respected. As a result, the status of the Maoshan sect naturally skyrocketed. It was no longer the same as before. At the entrance of the venue, 2 Taoists in gold-threaded robes slowly walked in. The Taoist on the left was 8 feet tall, handsome, and chiseled. His eyes were like torches. He was Zhang Xiaoyang, the sect leader of Zhengyi's sect of Longhu Mountain. The Taoist on the right had dark eyebrows, starry eyes, and a handsome face. He was none other than Yu Xingqian, the sect leader of Chuanjin sect. Zhang Xiaoyang cursed in a low voice as he walked in. What bad luck! I saw that Lu guy as soon as I came in. He's the imperial preceptor now. You should keep a low profile. Yu Xingqian, who was walking side by side with Zhang Xiaoyang, advised Zhang Xiaoyang, it doesn't matter if you offend him, but Zhengyi's sect will suffer. Zhang Xiaoyang snorted and glanced at Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan looked at Zhang Xiaoyang coldly and drank his tea quietly. He was no longer the old Lu Yuanshan. Not only was he the imperial preceptor now, but his cultivation was also incomparable to before. Celestial Master Zhang, sect leader Yu. Gu Sang Duoji, who came to the door, greeted Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian. He had once met the 2 of them. At that time, the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty had once held a Buddhist prayer assembly, gathering the abbot of all the famous temples and Taoist temple masters to pray for the prosperity of the country. It was also at that assembly that he met the 2 famous Taoist masters in Jianghu. Master Gusang, Zhang Xiaoyang, and Yu Xingqian stopped and greeted Gusang Duoji. The 8 Yin-Yang masters greet the 2 sect leaders. Tian Qian, along with the other 7 disciples, bowed to the 2 as a Taoist. The Zhengyi sect and the Chuanjin sect were famous Taoist sects with orthodox lineages. The 8 of them did not dare to slight them. The 8 Yin-Yang masters? Tian Qian's words made Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian frown and look at each other. They had heard about the 8 Yin-Yang masters before. Now that the other party called themselves the 8 Yin-Yang masters, they were a little confused. Tian Qian smiled and told the 2 of them about the situation. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian suddenly understood. They nodded slightly and returned the greeting. Although the 2 of them had some opinions about the 8 Yin-Yang masters' actions back then, they were from the same sect after all, so they had to put on an act. Sect leaders, what a rare guest. Please come in. Gusang Doji put his palms together and greeted the two of them warmly. Master, you're too polite, Zhang Xiaoyang replied. You don't have to greet us. We'll just sit on the side. Except for the entrance in the southeast corner, the entire venue was surrounded by tables and chairs. Zhang Xiaoyang did not want to sit with Lu Yuanshan, so he proposed to sit on the side and refused to sit on the main altar. How can this do? Gusang Duoji did not know that the two of them had a grudge with Lu Yuanshan. He said, if I let the two of you sit on the side, wouldn't I be guilty of not treating my guests well? Please take a seat on the altar. As he spoke, he invited the two of them to the altar. We appreciate the master's kindness, Yu Xingchen said to Gusang Duoji. The two of us are used to being free and undisciplined. We don't like formal occasions. The side seats are quieter. Please let us sit casually. Yu Xingchen was a calm person. He knew when to speak and when to act, unlike Zhang Xiaoyang, who was straightforward. Okay. Gusang Duoji thought for a moment and said, it's convenient for others and convenient for ourselves. Since the two of you prefer peace and quiet, this old monk will follow suit. Thank you, master, Zhang Xiaoyang said to Gusang Duoji. He turned and walked to the side seats, ignoring the 8 yin-yang masters. Yu Xingchen nodded to the crowd and followed closely behind. Gusang Duoji looked at the backs of the two and frowned slightly. He then turned and led the 8 yin-yang masters to the altar. The 8 yin-yang masters are not good people either, Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingchen as he walked. What do you mean? Yu Xingchen asked. Aside from them, who else would be able to use such a vicious punishment? Zhang Xiaoyang said as he looked at Yi Fan, who was tied to the octopole spell pillar and deformed beyond recognition. How do you know they did it? Yu Xingchen asked as he walked. Can a motley crew on the altar make these pillars? Zhang Xiaoyang turned his head and asked Yu Xingchen. Yu Xingchen shook his head. The 8 extreme spell pillars were obviously set up by a Taoist master. The mountain spirits and wild monsters on the altar did not have this ability at all. Among the 8 yin-yang masters, did you notice the horsetail whisk and sword of the second Taoist? Zhang Xiaoyang turned his head and asked again. Yu Xingchen shook his head again. The tip of his horsetail whisk is white with a hint of red. The bloodstains are too deep. The sword on his back is also faintly glowing with blood, Zhang Xiaoyang said with a frown. If I'm not wrong, the injuries on Eldritch's arms and eyes were caused by him. Yu Xingchen frowned and turned his head to look at Di Kuan. At the same time, he used his heavenly eye technique. Buzzed 2 golden lights flashed across Yu Xingchen's eyes. Yu Xingchen's frown deepened when he saw this. The sword on Di Kuan's back was glowing with blood, while the swords of the other 7 yin-yang masters were all normal. Zhang Xiaoyang's analysis was completely correct. Look at the crowd again, Zhang Xiaoyang said in a low voice. Yu Xingchen immediately turned his head to look at the crowd and scanned back and forth. Yu Xingchen's expression changed immediately when he saw this. Among the crowd, a young man with the appearance of Buffon stood there quietly. His body was surrounded by a golden light that shone through the top of his head. Emperor's Star. Yu Xingchen blurted out. Shu. Zhang Xiaoyang put his index finger to his lips, indicating for Yu Xingchen to keep quiet. Chapter 612. Half an hour passed quickly. During this period of time, representatives from various sects and schools had arrived one after another. The originally empty seats in the venue had immediately become overcrowded, and the atmosphere was extraordinarily lively. Everyone was greeting each other in their seats, exchanging hypocritical pleasantries. All of them had the appearance of otherworldly experts. The grand occasion made Gusang Doji very satisfied. Since the establishment of the Sweet Dew Temple, this was the first time so many experts had gathered here. After today, he and the Sweet Dew Temple would be famous all over the world. At that time, perhaps the new position of Guardian King would be his. Thinking of this, an imperceptible smile appeared on Gusang Doji's face. On the top of a mountain dozens of miles away from the venue, a 17 or 18-year-old boy stood there quietly, staring at the noisy venue with a pair of amber eyes. His face was solemn, and his eyes were cold. He wore a white Confucian headscarf, a snow-white robe, a white jade belt around his waist, and white snow boots on his feet. His face was like jade, his lips were red, and his teeth were white. On his forehead, a silver light flickered, and a stream of chi flowed. Behind him, thousands of war wolves sat quietly on the empty snow. Pairs of green eyes looked coldly at the crowd in the venue at the foot of the mountain. From time to time, they licked their lips with their blood-red tongues. These war wolves were extremely large, each as big as a pony. The 7 snow wolves in the lead were even more robust, not much different from adult bison. The wolf pack was extremely quiet and did not make the slightest movement. Like a well-trained army, they were motionless. The boy looked up at the sky and frowned slightly, showing an anxious expression. At this moment, a group of people came to the foot of Feishua Peak. The 3 people in the lead were dressed in snow-white robes. Each of them held a weapon and walked in a hurry. Behind them were dozens of people wearing green curtains and bamboo hats. Their faces were covered with a light veil, only revealing their dark eyes. They looked extremely mysterious. These people covered in green curtains were divided into 3 rows. Their footsteps were orderly, and the sound of their footsteps was extremely heavy. Everywhere they passed, even the gravel under the snow was trampled into slag by them. "Father, Brother Chun, the 2 of you stay here and support me. I'm going to check on fan air situation. Without my signal, don't act rashly." The white-clothed man with the golden sword frowned as he spoke to the other 2. This person was none other than Yi Fan's father, the inverse scale sword, Yi Kong. The other 2 were the head of the Yi clan, Snow Sword Yi Yun and Absolute Needle Yi Chun. On the way back to the Great Ming Dynasty from the Mongol Empire, they heard about the demon-slaying conference. When they heard that the people they were going to kill at the conference were Eldritch from his previous life and Yi Fan from this life, the 3 of them panicked. Especially Yi Kong. He, who had always been calm and collected, immediately turned his horse around and prepared to go straight to Tibet to rescue Yi Fan. Yi Fan was his beloved son. Now that his beloved son had been captured and was in imminent danger, how could he not panic? In the end, it was Yi Yun and Yi Chun who worked together to stop Yi Kong from panicking. They told Yi Kong that the demon-slaying conference was far away in Tibet, and it would be held in 10 days. If they wanted to rescue Yi Fan, they had to make sufficient preparations. If they acted rashly, it would only make things worse. Only then did Yi Kong calm down. After the 3 of them discussed, they came up with a plan to rescue Yi Fan. Yi Yun handed the clan members over to a dozen experts and instructed them to lead the clan members forward. At this time, the Yi clan members had already entered the borders of the Great Ming Dynasty. In addition, the imperial court had issued a general amnesty, and the Yi clan members had the crown prince's handwritten order in their hands. It could be said that their journey was smooth and foolproof. After handing over everything, the 3 of them whipped their horses and went straight to the ancestral home. In order to successfully rescue Yi Fan, Yi Yun brought out the 33 bronze men from the ancestral home for the first time. Now that the situation was urgent, he couldn't care less about the ancestral teachings. They prepared 3 carriages with 6 horses, loaded the 33 bronze figures into the carriages, and covered them with green curtains. Then they spurred the horses to drive the carriages, day and night, heading towards Tibet. After exhausting nearly 100 horses, the 3 of them and the 33 bronze men finally arrived on the 10th day. "Kong, be careful," Yi Yun instructed Yi Kong. "This is Tibet, not China. Our mission is to rescue Fan Air, not to kill. You must control yourself and not act rashly. Understand?" Yi Yun's instructions to Yi Kong weren't without reason. Yi Kong was Yi Fan's father. After seeing his beloved son being controlled, he might not be able to control his emotions and start massacre. This was the sacred land of Buddhism. Once he angered thousands of Tibetans, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Father, don't worry. I know what I'm doing," Yi Kong said and nodded to the 2 of them. Using his movement technique, the tip of his foot touched the ground and followed the steep snow mountain into the sky. He stepped on the cliff, and flew up. Looking at Yi Kong's back view, Yian felt a little uneasy. He had a feeling that something big was going to happen today, something very unusual. He didn't know that when Yi Kong left, not only did he not restrain himself, he completely started a massacre. After Yi Kong left, Yi Chun took out a few copper coins from his sleeve and shook them in his hand. He then gently threw them on the ground. Every time something big happened, he would do a divination to predict the good or bad luck. But when he saw the divination shown by the copper coins, Yi Chun's face instantly changed. He was shocked. He saw that the copper coins were standing straight on the ground. Not a single one of them had fallen. This was the first time he saw such a divination since he was born. Chun'er, this divination is... Yian also saw this strange scene and asked Yi Chun in surprise. This divination has no signs. There's no solution. Yi Chun shook his head and said, No solution? Why is there no solution? Yian frowned and asked. The mysteries of heaven are unfathomable. Yeah, Chun said with a solemn expression. Yi Yun's face changed when he heard that. At this moment, there were no empty seats in the venue. Most of the representatives from the various sects had already arrived. Outside the venue, the bustling crowd was crowded. All of them stood on their tiptoes and stretched their necks to look inside the venue. Master Gesang, the time is up. We can start now. Tian Xian, who was sitting on the right side of Gesang Doji, whispered in Gesang Doji's ear. The 8 of them wanted to see Eldritch die as soon as possible, so they were more anxious than anyone else. Gesang Doji looked up at the sky and nodded gently. Master Lu, the time is up. Can we start now? Gesang Doji turned his head and asked Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan was the state preceptor and the person with the highest status in this conference. He naturally had to show respect. Master is too polite. Lu Yuanshan, who was wearing a golden silk robe, put down the butter tea in his hand and said to Gesang Doji with a smile, You are the leader of this demon-killing conference. How dare I make a decision? In that case, this old monk will be rude. Gesang Doji said to Lu Yuanshan. Master, please. Lu Yuanshan said with a smile. After Gesang Doji nodded to Lu Yuanshan, he nodded to a red-clothed lama below the platform. The red-clothed lama put his palms together and returned the salute to Gesang Dorje. Then he slowly walked to the front of a huge drum beside him. He picked up 2 drumsticks from the drum stand and began to beat the huge leather drum. Dong, dong, dong. The rhythm of the drum went from slow to urgent. The sound entered the ears and shook the soul, making people feel refreshed. As more than a dozen red-clothed lamas, standing on both sides of the venue, immediately blew the huge copper horns in their hands. Gesang Doji, who was wearing a solemn monk robe, slowly stood up from his seat and looked at the crowd below. His face was sacred and his eyes were majestic. Hula, when the countless Tibetan people saw Gesang Doji stand up, they immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to him. Gesang Doji was the abbot of the Sweet Dew Temple and the junior brother of Golden Rock Phawang. This time, he had personally captured Eldritch who had fallen into the demon path. Naturally, he had a supreme position in the hearts of the believers. When Lu Yuanshan saw this, he was displeased. He was the imperial preceptor. These dirty Tibetan people did not even bow to him just now, but now they were bowing to Gesang Doji. He drank the butter tea with a gloomy face and looked coldly at the kneeling Tibetan people below. However, when he saw the crown prince in the crowd, who was wearing a Tibetan robe and looking at him coldly, he almost spat out the mouthful of butter tea in his mouth. The crown prince is here too. Lu Yuanshan was shocked. What is he doing here? He is in disguise. Lu Yuanshan thought to himself and prepared to get off the platform to welcome the crown prince. However, at this moment, the crown prince frowned and shook his head gently. Obviously, the crown prince did not want to reveal his identity. Lu Yuanshan understood tacitly, and the butt that had just lifted up sat back down again. Hula, the Tibetan people finished kowtowing and stood up from the ground. The crown prince's figure was once again submerged in the crowd. Lu Yuanshan's mind was spinning as he thought about the crown prince's intentions. To see Eldritch being killed with his own eyes? Impossible. Lu Yuanshan quickly rejected this idea. If that was the case, he could reveal his identity and come personally as the crown prince. In this way, not only could he see Eldritch being killed, but he could also show the royal family's sympathy for the people and love them like his own children. If he was not here to see Eldritch being killed, then what was the crown prince doing here? He came all the way from the capital. Could it be that he was here to visit incognito? That was also impossible. Now that the 4 countries were pressuring the border, Zhou Dao had powerful soldiers in his hands and was plotting a rebellion. This was the time of national crisis. The crown prince would not ignore the country's crisis and come here to play and visit incognito. This was not the case. That was not the case. Then what was his purpose? Lu Yuanshan thought hard. He had to guess the crown prince's purpose because he was the state preceptor. He wanted to use this opportunity to help the crown prince achieve his goal and show his loyalty. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. This thought made his expression change instantly. He was not here to watch the show, nor was he here to visit incognito. Could it be that he came to save Eldritch? Thinking of this, Lu Yuanshan looked at the crowd again. This time, he looked at the old eunuch next to the crown prince. At this time, the old eunuch's eyes were as sharp as knives as he stared at him. When their eyes met, the old eunuch looked at Yi Fan in the middle of the execution field and then turned his eyes to Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan's pupils shrank. The old eunuch's meaning was clear. The crown prince came for this person. His deduction was not wrong. The crown prince wanted to save Eldritch. Fan air. Just as Lu Yuanshan was shocked, a heart-wrenching roar came from the sky. The sound was deafening and resounding through the sky. At this time, the drum had just stopped, and everyone was frightened by this roar. Night sky. When the crown prince saw the white figure in midair that was as strong and vigorous as a dragon, his face instantly lit up with joy. Chapter 613. The newcomer was none other than Yi Kong. He knew that his son would definitely suffer some physical pain this time, but he never imagined that the scene in front of him would be so tragic. When he saw his beloved son hanging from the 8 extreme spell pillars in the middle of the execution field, missing both arms, Yi Kong let out the most heart-wrenching roar of his life. How could he not lose control of his emotions when his beloved son, whom he couldn't even bear to slap since he was young, was being tortured like this? With red-rimmed eyes, he descended from the sky like an enraged lion. Boom! With the inverse scale sword in hand, Yi Kong landed right in front of the 8 extreme spell pillars. The huge impact created a huge crater with a radius of 5 feet. Fan air. Yi Kong roared as he leaped onto the steps of the 8 extreme spell pillars and rushed in front of Yi Fan. Yi Fan slowly raised his head and looked at Yi Kong with a pair of bloody sockets. With an extremely weak voice, he called out, "Father." This call of "Father" made Yi Kong's heart feel like it was being stabbed by 1,000 swords and slashed by 10,000 knives. Fan air. Yi Kong choked, his lips trembling. He extended his trembling hand and gently stroked Yi Fan's bloodied cheek. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife, and the pain pierced through his heart. Looking at his beloved son, who no longer looked human, with his eyes gouged out, arms chopped off, and tendons severed, 2 streams of hot tears flowed from his eyes. Fan air. Father came late, came late. Yi Kong choked. "Father," Yi Fan said in a choked voice. 2 streams of blood flowed out from the 2 holes in his face. Sigh, what a sin. The touching reunion of father and son made Zhang Xiaoyang, who was sitting at the side, shake his head and sigh. Yu Xingqian frowned and remained silent. Fan air. Tell father. Who hurt you like this? Yi Kong wiped his tears with his sleeve and asked Yi Fan. Yi Fan turned his head to the back and stared at the spell altar with bloodshot eyes. Yi Kong raised his head and swept his cold gaze over the crowd on the execution platform. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. The crowd on the execution platform looked at Yi Kong with disdain. All of them had hundreds of years of cultivation and did not put Yi Kong in their eyes at all. Lu Yuanshan had an awkward expression on his face, not knowing what kind of expression he should make. He regretted sitting on the spell altar. If he had known earlier, he would have sat at the side like Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen. Now, he had become jackals of the same tribe as them. Yikong's eyes stopped on Gasandoji. "Are you Gasandoji?" Yikong asked Gasandoji in a terrifyingly calm voice. "That's me," Gasandoji replied. "You must be this devil's father, Yikong, right?" Upon hearing the name Yikong, the crowd was shocked at first. Then they started whispering to each other. Rumor had it that Yi Kong was a once-in-a-century genius of the Yi family. He had met an immortal master at Mount Longhu and learned the immortal sword secret technique, the ethereal sword technique. No one could compare to him. Yi Kong did not answer Gasandoji. Instead, he slowly unsheathed his sword. Just as the inverse scale sword left its scabbard, countless rays of golden light shot out from the sword. Clang! The inverse scale sword let out a dragon's roar and was as smooth as the autumn waters. The entire sword was completely unsheathed by Yikong. The golden light illuminated the night sky and the rocky ground in a radius of 30 feet. It also illuminated his red eyes and expressionless face. It was the inverse scale sword. As soon as Yikong unsheathed his sword, the experts at the conference were shocked. They had long heard of the inverse scale sword in Yikong's hand, but they had never seen it before. They had heard that this sword was innately engraved with dragon patterns and blazing yang energy. It was extremely domineering. Now that they had seen it with their own eyes, it truly lived up to its reputation. "Yikong," Gasandoji pointed at Yikong and said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to rob me?" However, before Gasandoji could finish his sentence, the inverse scale sword in Yikong's hand had already swung down. Whoosh! As Yikong swung his sword down, a huge golden light screen shot out from the inverse scale divine weapon in his hand and headed straight for Gasandoji, who was dozens of feet away. The speed of the golden light screen was as fast as lightning. It arrived in the blink of an eye. Gasandoji, who was in the center of the spell platform, did not even have time to see Yi Kong's movements before the golden light screen arrived in front of him. The dazzling golden light enveloped the entire spell platform in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Tian Qian, who was sitting beside Gasandoji, grabbed the arm of the stunned and confused Gasandoji. Then he activated his movement technique and leaped into the air. Lu Yuanshan, on the other hand, made a hand seal the moment Yi Kong launched his sword move. His figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. The Savage Corpse King's movement technique was not any slower than Lu Yuanshan's. He followed closely behind Lu Yuanshan and disappeared into thin air. The rest of the enemies used their own abilities. They either used earth meld or movement techniques to quickly disperse. Boom! A huge sound rang out. Stone chips flew everywhere, and waves of air spread in all directions. As the huge golden light screen descended from the sky, the huge spell platform, which was more than 300 feet long and made of solid stone, was instantly split into two from the middle. Some of the enemies who were slower in their movement techniques were not able to dodge in time due to their carelessness. They were directly split from head to toe by the golden light screen released by Yi Kong's inverse scale sword. Puff, 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 crack, crack. The sound of splattering brains and the sound of breaking bones rang out in an instant and disappeared in an instant. These people did not even have the time to see Eldritch being killed. They had already gone to see the King of Hell. Crash! After the spell platform was struck by Yi Kong's sword move, it collapsed and disintegrated. Yi Kong's one move had destroyed the spell platform. Several experts with hundreds of years of cultivation had died instantly. What a great sword move! Zhang Xiaoyang, who was sitting at the side, exclaimed. Yi Kong's sword move looked ordinary and unremarkable. However, once it was unleashed, it had the domineering power of a landslide. As expected of a Yi family's once-in-a-century prodigy, this Yi Kong was truly impressive. This person can unleash such a domineering move just by using his vital energy. If he had used his spiritual energy cultivation, Yu Xingchen, who was sitting beside Zhang Xiaoyang, frowned, and turned to look at Zhang Xiaoyang. If he had used his spiritual energy, I'm afraid this sweet dew temple would have been reduced to ashes by now. Zhang Xiaoyang finished Yu Xingchen's sentence with a serious expression. I can see that this person does not have any spiritual energy cultivation. I think the immortal who taught him this move must have done so intentionally, Yu Xingchen said. I heard that this person was an immortal beggar he met on Longhu Mountain. That's how he learned the immortal sword move, the ethereal sword technique. Say, I live on Longhu Mountain. Why didn't I have such good luck? Zhang Xiaoyang said, then suddenly paused and turned to look at Yu Xingchen. Yu Xingchen was confused by Zhang Xiaoyang's look. It's him. Zhang Xiaoyang said excitedly to Yu Xingchen. It's him. Yu Xingchen frowned, even more confused. Beggar, Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingchen. The beggar we met in the restaurant must be the immortal that Yi Kong met back then. Didn't old Qing tell us that the beggar we met was an immortal? Hearing Zhang Xiaoyang's words, Yu Xingchen was stunned for a moment before realization dawned on him. They were both beggars and immortals, and they both appeared on Longhu Mountain. The beggar they met must be the same person who taught Yi Kong the ethereal sword technique. I'm afraid we can't just stand by and watch today, Zhang Xiaoyang said. What do you mean? Yu Xingchen asked with a frown. The Emperor's star is here, and so is the immortal's disciple. This only proves that Eldritch isn't a bad person in this world, Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingchen. Zhang Xiaoyang said to Xing Chun, look at that disorderly mob again. You could tell right from wrong with just one look. You and I are both cultivators and leaders of our respective sections. We can't do things against our conscience. You want to help Eldritch? Yu Xingchen asked Zhang Xiaoyang directly. You want to raid the execution ground in front of all the large sects? Are you coming or not? Zhang Xiaoyang asked even more directly. Fine, I'll just give up my position as sect master, Yu Xingchen said as he prepared to stand up. Zhang Xiaoyang pulled Yu Xingchen to sit down. Why are you more anxious than I am? Zhang Xiaoyang whispered to Yu Xingchen. Let's wait first. Why? Yu Xingchen frowned and asked Zhang Xiaoyang. Don't you think it's strange? Zhang Xiaoyang asked Yu Xingchen. All of Eldritch's enemies are here, but none of his friends from back then are here? You mean? Yu Xingchen seemed to understand something. Just wait and see. The best part is yet to come, Zhang Xiaoyang said with a smile. Let's see the legendary ethereal sword technique first. Yu Xingchen was speechless. On the other side, Yi Kong turned around with the inverse scale, sword in his hand, and faced Yi Fan. Fan Air, hang in there for a while. I'll put you down now, Yi Kong said as he swung the inverse scale sword at the golden chains around Yi Fan's body. Clang, golden light shot out in all directions as the sound of metal clashing rang out. The golden chains did not react to Yi Kong's attack at all. They didn't even leave a mark on them. Yi Kong frowned. It was obvious that the chains in front of him were no ordinary objects. Father, Yi Fan said in a weak voice. Don't waste your energy. You can't break these chains. Just leave. Don't worry about me. Ha! Inverse scale sword, Yi Kong. That's all there is to you. Tian Qian's laughter rang out from the sky. Yi Kong raised his head and looked at the sky. Tian Qian, who was wearing Yi Fan's 8 treasures embroidered robe, slowly descended from the sky and looked at Yi Kong with disdain. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The remaining 7 followed closely behind with mocking smiles on their faces. These 8 extreme spell pillars aren't the firewood you use to cook. You can break them with a single strike, Di Kuan said with a smile. Father, leave now, Yi Fan said loudly to Yi Kong. He didn't tell Yi Kong about how the 8 Yin Yang disciples had treated him. The reason was simple. He was worried that Yi Kong wouldn't be a match for them. If that happened, not only would he fail to save Yi Kong, he would also be captured. Hearing this, Yi Kong slowly took 5 steps back. A wise man submits to circumstances. I think you should back off now. Scram, Di Kuan said sarcastically when he saw Yi Kong take 5 steps back. He thought that Yi Kong was going to back off. However, he was wrong. Yi Kong didn't turn around and leave as he expected. Instead, he saw Yi Xian grip the swimming dragon's sword hilt made of black gold with both hands and raised the inverse scale sword above his head. He closed his eyes and focused his chi. Old Yu watched carefully. Zhang Xiaoyang's eyes widened as he reminded Yu Xingqian beside him. Yu Xingqian also noticed something and stared unblinkingly at Yikong. Boom! As Yikong channeled the Xiantian Yuan Qi in his body, a huge golden pillar of light more than 3 meters thick shot out from Yikong's body. It shot straight into the air, reaching a height of several hundred meters. Buzz! Yikong raised the inverse scale sword above his head and let out an excited cry. Instantly, the golden light dazzled and dazzled. The sword's ray expanded to more than 3 meters and shot toward the bull. Whoosh! The Xiantian Yuan Qi stirred up a huge shockwave, causing Yikong's clothes to flutter in the wind. All the experts in the arena, as well as his enemies, were stunned by Yikong's earth-shattering aura. They all fell silent, as if they were mutes. The 8 yin-yang disciples all took 3 steps back, their expressions changing drastically. Yikong's sudden increase in strength was unbelievable to them. What a powerful Yuan Qi! Sasaki, who was beside Matsumoto Takeyoshi, frowned and said. Matsumoto Takeyoshi frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. This Yikong is really something. The disguised crown prince also praised from the bottom of his heart. He had only heard rumors about Yikong, but he didn't expect him to be even more powerful than the rumors made him out to be. Void Spirit Slash, Yikong said coldly as his eyes suddenly opened. Whoosh! Chapter 614. Whoosh! Following Yikong's swift downward slash, a gigantic golden sword arc burst forth from the inverse scale sword, heading straight for the octopole spell pillar. The sword arc was over 3 zhang long, dazzling and dazzling with golden light. Its speed was as fast as lightning, arriving in the blink of an eye. Rip! The golden sword arc tore through the air, producing a sharp sound. This Yikong is so arrogant, trying to break the octopole spell pillar, the 8 gates golden lock. Tianxian, the leader of the yin-yang 8 scions, was secretly shocked. An ant trying to shake a tree, a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Di Kuan sneered as he watched Yikong attack the octopole spell pillar. The 8 extreme technique pillars gathered the energy of the 8 extremes of yin and yang in the heavens and the earth. Coupled with the 8-gate golden lock formation, it could be said to be flawless and possess shocking might. Besides the 8 of them, it was utterly impossible to break through. Even if Tian wanted to break through the heavens, he was still just a mortal. Wanting to destroy the octopole spell pillars with his meager cultivation was simply a fool's dream, wishful thinking. The remaining 6 wore looks of disdain and mockery. They could almost see how Yikong's organs were damaged by the octopole spell pillar, and how he was sent flying. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian didn't even blink, not missing any of Yikong's subtle movements. The strength of the legendary immortal technique, ethereal sword art, would depend on Night Sky's sword strike. As the saying went, the connoisseur saw the artistry, while the layman saw the excitement. The Crown Prince had never seen such a magnificent battle before, so he was naturally excited. He clenched his fists, his eyes widened, and his heart was in his throat. He was sweating profusely for Yikong's attack. Yikong's casual move just now destroyed the huge spell platform and killed several experts in an instant. Now, he didn't know if this sword could break the octopole spell pillar. The old eunuch on the side looked at the golden pillar of light shooting up into the night sky and nodded repeatedly. Whoosh! Yikong's gigantic golden sword arc was extremely fast from the moment it was released to the moment it struck. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic golden sword arc and the octopole spell pillar collided. Boom! A deafening boom rang out. Dazzling golden light burst forth. The ground trembled, and waves of air spread out in all directions. Everyone present covered their ears with their hands and covered their eyes with their sleeves as they were shaken by the sudden burst of light and the loud sound. Phew! Voila! The huge shockwave overturned all the tables in the execution field, and all the butter tea, pastries, and fruits flew into the air. All the experts displayed their abilities, using their sleeves to flick their sleeves while using their movement techniques to fly up from their seats. Lu Yuanshan was more cautious this time. Taking advantage of the opportunity to dodge, he brought the Savage Corpse King and used his movement technique to sneak to the Crown Prince's side. He took off the conspicuous Taoist robe on his body. At the same time, he urged his spiritual energy to set up a Qi wall in front of the Crown Prince, blocking the Qi wave for the Crown Prince. "This humble subject greets Your Highness the Crown Prince," Lu Yuanshan said softly as he spread the Qi. The Crown Prince glanced at him before continuing to watch the execution field. He was in a hurry to find out the power of Yi Kong's sword, so he was not in the mood to bother with Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan was given the cold shoulder and did not say anything else. Inside the execution field, the Yin-Yang 8 disciples blocked their eyes with one hand to avoid the golden light, while the other flung their sleeves to block the Qi wave. Di Kuan impatiently waved his sleeves, driving away the flying dust. He wanted to see to what extent Yi Kong was injured by the 8 extreme spell pillar. However, when the dust gradually dispersed, the scene in front of him instantly shocked him. Yi Kong stood quietly in place, holding his sword with one hand, not moving at all. He was not sent flying like he had imagined, but was completely unscathed, and not a single hair was damaged. How is this possible? How could this guy not be injured by the shockwave? Di Kuan hurriedly looked at the 8 extreme spell pillar with a face full of disbelief. The spell pillar was still the same as before. Di Kuan let out a long breath. When they saw the 8 extreme spell pillar still standing in the middle of the execution field, the expressions of the experts in the execution field began to change. The shock on their faces just had turned into disdain. "The thunder is loud, but the rain is small," one of the sect masters among the experts said with a smile. "This genius of the Yi clan is only SOSO. Another sect leader chimed in. "This 8 extreme spell pillar is indeed powerful. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples live up to their reputation. As expected of the cornerstone of the Taoist sect, their Taoist techniques are exquisite. It is our Taoist sect's fortune to have such a high Tao." Voices began to slander Yi Kong and praise the Yin-Yang 8 disciples from the crowd. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples cupped their hands in greeting to the experts with a smug expression. As they cupped their hands in greeting, they looked at Yi Kong with a cold smile. Ethereal, light, but not spirit, as expected of a good sword technique. A good sword technique. He. Di Kuan sneered at the night sky. "Don't embarrass yourself here, get lost." Tian Qian smiled at Yi Kong. The night sky listened quietly, not moving at all. In the distance, Gu Sandoji stroked his beard with a smile. Earlier, he was completely shocked by Yi Kong's aura, but now, it seemed that it was only SOSO. When Yi Fan heard the crowd's mocking and ridiculing of his father, a flame of fury rose in his heart. They could insult him and beat him up, but they couldn't insult his father. However, even though he was angry and wanted to help his father out of this predicament, he was unable to do so. Sigh. The Crown Prince sighed when he saw that the 8 extreme spell pillar was still intact. He clenched his right fist and hit his left palm. The 8 extreme spell pillar was indeed powerful. Even Yi Kong's ethereal sword technique couldn't break it. The Crown Prince was a little dejected. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples were indeed worthy of their reputation. If he could recruit them in the future, he would be like a tiger that had grown wings. This bunch of idiots, they've already lost, but they still have the mood to be smug? Just as the experts present were praising the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, Zhang Xiaoyang smirked as he looked at the Yin-Yang 8 disciples who were cupping their hands in greeting. Yu Xingqian smiled and didn't comment. "I say, Yi Kong, why haven't you scrammed yet? Do you still feel that you haven't lost enough face?" Di Kuan mocked when he saw that Yi Kong was still standing there. Crack. At this moment, a crisp sound came from above. Yi Kong's lips curled. When the Yin-Yang 8 disciples heard this crisp sound, They immediately looked up into the sky. It didn't matter, but the 8 of them were so shocked that their expressions changed drastically. On the top of the 8 extreme spell pillar, a crack more than a foot long had appeared. The 8 extreme spell pillar cracked. Crack, crack. The crack gradually extended from top to bottom. When the experts who were praising the Yin-Yang 8 disciples saw this, the smiles on their faces immediately froze. They looked at the 8 extreme spell pillar that kept cracking in silence, their faces filled with disbelief. Gusandoji was also stunned in an instant, dumbfounded. How could this be? Wasn't this 8 extreme spell pillar unmatched? How could it be split open by Yikong? Gusandoji almost couldn't believe that all this was real. Matsumoto Takayoshi's eyes were wide open, and his smile disappeared. Crack, crack. The crack on the 8 extreme spell pillar grew bigger and bigger, and it instantly split open to the ground. Clang. At the same time, a clear ringing sound rang out, and a golden line appeared on the 8 golden chains that were tied around Yi Fan's body. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples' pupils contracted instantly. The 8 golden locks were actually split open by Yikong. At this moment, the execution field was extremely quiet. Only the whistling of the wind and the crisp sound of the 8 extreme spell pillar cracking could be heard. Boom! Just as everyone was dumbfounded, the huge 8 extreme spell pillar instantly cracked open and splattered everywhere. Bang! At the same time, the 8 golden chains wrapped around Yi Fan's body broke. Good sword technique. Good sword technique. Zhang Xiaoyang's eyes were wide open as he blurted out. With one move, the empty spirit slash, the 8 extreme spell pillar, and the 8 golden locks were completely destroyed. What kind of power was this? Good, good, good. The Crown Prince said the word good 3 times in a row. A celestial technique was indeed a celestial technique, and its power was beyond the imagination of mortals. The old eunuch and Lu Yuanshan were shocked. They were also completely stunned by Yi Kong's sword technique. The Yi family's genius was no joke. Sasaki and Miyamoto Akichi looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with shock. As the saying went, a tiger father would not beget a dog son, and vice versa, a tiger son would not beget a dog father. Yi Fan's father's sword technique was so high, and the sharpness of his sword technique was something they had never seen before. Once the shackles were removed, Yi Fan's body loosened, and his body fell down instantly. Whoosh! The moment Yi Fan fell, Yi Kong used his movement technique and instantly hugged Yi Fan. In order to save his beloved son, he used all of his vital energy to activate the empty spirit sword technique. The deep affection between father and son, coupled with the exquisite celestial sword technique, Yi Kong released an extraordinary power. Fan air. Yi Kong looked at Yi Fan in his arms and shouted in pain. Father! Yi Fan called Yi Kong weakly. The scene in front of Zhang Xiaoyang made his eyes turn red. Yu Xingqian turned his head to the side, unable to look directly at the scene. This scene was so touching that even the two of them couldn't help but feel moved by the deep affection between father and son. Matsumoto Takayoshi furrowed his brows with a solemn expression. Yi Kong's sword just now made him finally understand why he had failed when he went to the Yi clan to snatch the weapon forging manual. This person's sword technique was so high that it was completely beyond his imagination. No wonder Qi Yao's arm was chopped off by this person, and she had to run away. With this person's sword technique, even if the 4 great guardians of the Tsimming Hall were here, they would not be able to do anything to him. In terms of sword and saber experts, Matsumoto Takayoshi had seen hundreds and thousands of them. Among them, there were not only top experts like Ito Fumio and Yamada Shingo, but also Sasaki and Bama Chongqing, who were experts in using swords. As the saying goes, even if you have not eaten pork, you have seen pigs run. After seeing so many experts, coupled with the green and white emissaries' frequent explanations, Matsumoto Takayoshi had gradually become an expert in judging experts. What kind of method the opponent used, whether it was close combat or long-range attack, movement technique or special technique, Whether it was a powerful weapon or a high cultivation level, he only needed to look at a few moves to be able to guess. However, this was the first time he had seen Yi Kong's sword technique, and he could not guess what kind of method it was at all. Ito Fumio and Yamada Shingo's swordsmanship used spiritual energy. Sasaki and Yagilong Kiyoshi's swordsmanship used swordsmanship. Mifumi Kunikaku and Aniki Lang's swordsmanship used swordsmanship. Yokoyama Yugo and Funiketsu Shinichi's swordsmanship focused more on strength and speed. However, the ethereal sword technique that Yi Kong used was completely different from these people's sword techniques. This person didn't use spirit chi, sword chi, special techniques, or strength. With just a light wave, he was able to unleash an earth-shattering power. This person could not be underestimated in the future. Matsumoto Takeyoshi remembered Yi Kong. When the 8 yin-yang disciples saw that the 8 extreme spell pillars and 8-gate golden lock were destroyed, they immediately looked at Gesang Dorji in the distance. Their magic weapons were destroyed, but the golden Buddha treasure bowl was still there. Yi Kong's ethereal sword technique did not hurt the golden Buddha treasure bowl, because the golden Buddha treasure bowl was still shining on Yi Fan's head. With tears in his eyes, Yi Kong carried Yi Fan, who had lost his arms and tendons, on his back. Then he pulled a golden iron chain from the ground and tied it to his waist, directly tying Yi Fan together with himself. Chapter 615. Whoosh! As soon as Yi Kong's voice fell, Gesang Dorje tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and rose into the air. He slowly landed 5 feet away from Yi Kong and stood with the yin-yang 8 masters. Whoosh! 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 The remaining 300 Cho clan members used their movement techniques and surrounded Yi Kong and his son in the center of the execution field. What do you want? Yi Kong held the sword with one hand, looked around, and asked coldly, Benefactor, ye can leave, but please leave behind the devil on your back. Gesang Dorji's voice was loud like a bell. He has fallen into the devil's path. If he is not eliminated, he will bring disaster to the world and plunge people into misery and suffering. Yi Kong, put down that evil creature and we can spare your life. Otherwise, next year today will be the anniversary of you and your son's death. Di Kuan said fiercely to Yi Kong. Yi Kong looked up at Gesang Dorji and the 8 yin-yang masters with cold eyes. Father, Yi Fan, who was lying on Yi Kong's back, used a weak voice to whisper into Yi Kong's ear. The one who disfigured this child was Gesang Dorji. The one who dug out this child's eyes and cut off the tendons of this child's arms and legs was this Taoist. Father, you must be careful of them. Yi Kong did not listen, but when he heard it, he was furious. Evil monk Gesang, yin-yang demonic Tao. If I don't tear you into pieces today, I, Yi Kong, am not a human. Yi Kong's eyes turned red in anger as he stared at Gesang Dorji and the 8 yin-yang masters, gnashing his teeth as he said this. Only now did he realize that the inhumane torture that had been inflicted on Aiko had been done by them. In that case, don't blame this old monk for being unreasonable. Gesang Dorji put his palms together and said with his head lowered, Didn't you want to kill Eldritch with your own hands? Now that the time has come, you may begin. Tian Xian, who was the leader, turned to the 300 enemies behind him with a smile on his face. Ever since they started preparing for this demon-slaying conference, these 300 enemies had been thinking about killing Eldritch with their own hands. However, Gesang Dorji and the 8 yin-yang warriors had been forbidding them from taking Eldritch's life with the excuse that it was not the right time. Now that Heavenly Qian said they could do it, the 300 enemies' eyes immediately shone. They looked at each other for a while, then the corners of their mouths curled up, and killing intent appeared. This Yi Kong's ethereal sword technique was indeed powerful, but as the saying goes, a good tiger cannot win against a pack of wolves. How could over 300 experts with hundreds of years of cultivation not be able to win against this mortal? As long as they rushed forward, even if this Yi Kong had 3 heads and 6 arms, he would definitely be torn into pieces in the blink of an eye. If he didn't take revenge now, when would he? Swish, 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 the 300 enemies instantly used their secret techniques and unique skills. The enemies were making hand seals, chanting incantations, controlling aura, and drawing talismans. It could be said that there were all kinds of strange things going on in the air. Whoosh, suddenly, the execution field was filled with mixed lights, and a fierce wind blew. Gasandoge, who was the leader, pointed his Buddhist staff at Yikong, who was in the middle, and shouted loudly, "Kill the evil and capture the demons. Eliminate the evil and defend the righteous path." Hearing Gasandoge's order to kill, the enemies attacked Yikong with the skills that they had been accumulating for a long time. Whoosh! A black smoke column spurted out from the mouth of one of the monsters and went straight to Yi Fan, who was on Yikong's back. Whoosh! 3 beams of green light shot out from the other monster's single mouth and eyes, heading straight for Yi Fan. Whoosh! A red light claw shot out from the palm of a Taoist priest and whizzed toward Yi Fan. Clang! A blue sword light in the shape of a sword shot out from the fingers of a coquettish woman and stabbed fiercely. The rest of the enemies either used secret talismans, poisonous smoke, strong winds, or strange skills. In short, they used their most vicious skills to kill Yi Fan and his son. More than 300 colorful light columns shot toward Yikong in an instant. Kill the evil and capture the demons? This bald donkey is really something. Zhang Xiaoyang sneered. He turned a blind eye to so many monsters and decided to kill the Yi family's father and son. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Let's go and help. Yu Xingqian couldn't stand it anymore and said anxiously to Zhang Xiaoyang, "These motley crew can't do anything to him. The ones we really need to be careful of are the Yin Yang 8, Zhang Xiaoyang, who was watching the battle from the side seat, whispered in Yu Xingqian's ear, "Good steel should be used on the blade. When they make their move, it won't be too late for us to help." Yu Xingqian furrowed his brows and nodded lightly. Zhang Xiaoyang was right. Yikong's ethereal sword technique was exquisite beyond compare. The inverse scale sword in his hand was blazing with yang energy and was especially effective against demons and monsters. Based on this, these motley crew were definitely no match for Yikong. The reason why the 8 yin-yang masters wanted them to be the vanguard was to exhaust Yikong's strength and vitality. When he was exhausted, they would attack him together. What despicable yin-yang 8! Yu Xingqian gritted his teeth and clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. The Crown Prince's palms were sweaty again. He really wanted to ask the experts hiding in the crowd to help. But then again, it was true that those people were experts, but it depended on who they were compared to. If they were compared to martial arts experts, they could be considered top-notch experts. But if they were compared to Eldritch's enemies in the execution field, they probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a single blow. Asking them to help was tantamount to sending them to their deaths. Asking Lu Yuanshan and the old eunuch to help? Probably not. Lu Yuanshan was already the state preceptor. Asking him to help was no different from revealing his identity. Once the crowd revolted, the consequences would be unimaginable, and the old eunuch was responsible for his own safety. Even if the crown prince ordered him to help, the old eunuch might not obey. The old emperor had once ordered the old eunuch to prioritize the crown prince's safety as his top priority. Even if the crown prince gave the order personally, the old eunuch could disobey it. The only thing he could do now was to wait and see. The crown prince thought to himself. Matsumoto Takeyoshi narrowed his eyes and calmly watched everything that was happening in the execution field. He could tell that the Yin-Yang 8 and Gesang Doji were bent on killing Yifan, but they had made a mistake. It was the same mistake that Zhou Dao had made back then. After capturing Yifan, they should have killed him immediately. There was no need for a demon-slaying conference. This person would be reborn from the ashes after every great calamity, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Who knew what would happen after such a great calamity this time? Being resourceful and scheming, he had already prepared 2 different plans in his mind. The first plan, when his enemies gained the upper hand He would have Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki make a move and help his enemies kill Yifan. Like this, great god Xietian and his mortal enemy would be eliminated. He would also be acquainted with eldritch enemies and could even use them for his own purposes. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had already expected the appearance of a Yi family. Moreover, he had already determined that the person saving Yi Fan wouldn't be Yi Kong alone. If his guess wasn't wrong, the Yi family's head, Yi Yun, and the other experts of the Yi family should have already arrived at Feishua Peak. Perhaps they were hiding in the crowd, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. Even a person at the Agony Hawk Peak would appear. As for the second plan, it was the complete opposite of the first plan. Once the experts coming to save Yi Fan had a chance of winning and the situation was good, he would have Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki make a move. Only they wouldn't help his enemies, but rather they would help Yi Fan escape from the execution field. Like this, Yi Fan would owe him a favor. Even if they fought in the future, the loyal and righteous Yi Fan would think twice before acting because of this favor. In other words, if he wanted to help an expert, he would help whichever side was stronger. But speaking of this, he wouldn't make a rash decision until the most critical moment. Once he made a wrong decision, it would have the opposite effect. Looking at Yi Kong now, facing several hundred killing moves, he immediately thought of something and began to circulate his innate energy. These people were Aiko's enemies from the previous life, so when they made a move, they would definitely target Aiko. The most important thing right now was to protect Aiko. A huge golden ball of light appeared around him out of thin air. The golden ball of light was 3 feet in size and shone with a dazzling golden light. It completely enveloped him in Yi Fan, spinning nonstop. More than 300 rays of 5-colored light arrived in the blink of an eye and hit Yi Kong's golden protective ball of light. Boom! A deafening sound was heard. Rays of light shone in all directions and waves of air rolled. Under the attack of more than 300 rays of 5-colored light, Yi Kong's golden protective ball of light was still shining and spinning nonstop. This scene made all the enemies unable to believe their eyes. Yi Kong was actually able to withstand the joint attack of so many experts. The 8 Yin-Yang disciples' expressions changed drastically. They were stunned. Yi Kong, who didn't have any spiritual energy cultivation, was able to reach such a level with just his own energy. The execution field was completely silent. Only the buzzing sound of the light pillars in the enemy's hands and the buzzing sound of Yi Kong's golden protective ball of light could be heard. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian smiled and nodded. The crown prince was excited and secretly applauded. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was still calm. Within the golden ball of light, Yi Kong's long hair shot up to the sky. His eyes shone with golden light, and his white robe fluttered in the wind. "Those who stand in my way die." Yi Kong roared and slashed with the sword in his hand. Boom! With a loud sound, the golden ball of light instantly turned into countless rays of golden light and exploded. Whoosh! The beams of light shot out from the hands of the enemies were instantly drowned out by the tens of thousands of golden rays shot out from the golden ball of light. Bang, 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 bang. The enemies' bodies were sent flying by the impact. Puff, 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 puff. Nearly 100 enemies vomited blood and landed heavily on the ground. Among them, more than a dozen demons couldn't stand up and died on the spot. Yi Kong's move killed more than a dozen people and injured nearly 100 people. He forced 300 experts to retreat. Puff! At this moment, Yi Kong felt a sweetness in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. In order to break the 8 extreme spell pillars, he had used 100% of his energy. Now, in order to stop the enemies from hurting his beloved son, he had used up all his energy by force. Even so, his gaze was still cold and domineering. He used the inverse scale sword in his hand to prop himself up. Chapter 616. Father. Yi Fan, who was lying on Yi Kong's back, shouted at the top of his lungs. He felt his father's body sway and heard his father spitting out blood. "Father, I'm fine," Yi Kong, who was bleeding from the corner of his mouth, said firmly with his sword on the ground. "Father." Yi Fan felt sorry for his father and choked with sobs. When he was born, his father sacrificed 10 years of his life to save him from the heavenly thunder. Now that he was in prison, his father used up all his strength to defeat the enemies. A father's love was like a mountain. In order to save him, his father did not care about his own safety and even risked his life. This was the kinship of the world. On the other side, the enemies who had flown backwards stabilized themselves and gathered together once again, surrounding Yi Kong and his son once again. Nearly 100 enemies who had been hit by Yi Kong just now wiped the blood from the corners of their mouths. Their faces were filled with killing intent as they gnashed their teeth. The remaining 200 enemies were breathing heavily as they tried to adjust their breathing. Yi Kong's attack was so powerful that it was beyond their imagination. It was indeed rare for a mortal to have this kind of ability. However, even if this person was made of iron, he was already at the end of his rope. He was spitting out blood, and his body was weak. His body was unstable, and his breathing was disordered. The consequences of forcefully activating his power were evident on this genius. As long as they attacked again, the father and son would definitely die. Yi Kong's serious injuries made Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen frown. Yi Kong's strength was already depleted. Under the forceful activation, his internal organs were severely injured. If this continued, not only would Yi Kong not be able to save his beloved son, he would also lose his life. It seemed that they had no choice but to do something. The two of them looked at each other and nodded. Whoosh! The two figures swayed and instantly turned into two golden phantoms, heading straight for the center of the execution field. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two golden figures appeared out of thin air in front of the night sky. Yi Kong, who was leaning on the ground with his sword, thought that an expert was about to launch a sneak attack. He immediately drew his sword and prepared to face the enemy. However, at this time, his vital chi had already dried up. He only had the strength to hold the sword, but not the strength to swing it. Puff! When Yi Kong saw that his attack had failed, he became anxious and spat out another mouthful of blood. He staggered and almost fell down. "Brother Yi, don't be nervous. The two of us are here to help you," Zhang Xiaoyang said as he reached out to support Yi Kong's left arm. Clap, clap, clap. Yu Xingchen supported Yi Kong's right arm with one hand, while her other hand quickly tapped on Yi Kong's chest. He was helping Yi Kong seal the origin chi in his 5 viscera to prevent Yi Kong from forcefully activating the true yuan in his heart again. Otherwise, once the true yuan dissipated, Yi Kong would die without a doubt. After a few golden lights flashed in front of Yi Kong's chest, Yi Kong slowly raised his head. "The two of you are?" Yi Kong asked Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen in a weak voice. "Zhengyi Zhang Xiaoyang. Xuanjin Yu Xingchen." The two of them replied. Thank you too. Sect Masters." Yi Kong forced himself to speak to the two of them. Yi Kong, appreciate your kindness. You don't have to worry about me. Brother Yi, don't force yourself at this time," Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yi Kong. "If you continue to forcefully activate your sword technique, you'll be dead before your son dies. You rest well. Leave the rest to us," Yu Xingchen said to Yi Kong. "Yi Fan will definitely repay both of you generously." Yi Fan stuttered as he spoke to the two of them. "Both you and your son are seriously injured. There's no need to say more. Rest well," Zhang Xiaoyang said as he and Yu Xingchen helped the two of them to the side to sit down. "Sect Masters, this is..." Gusang Dorji asked in confusion when he saw what the two of them were doing. When the two of them attacked just now, he thought that they were going to kill Yi Fan and his son. He never expected that the two of them were actually there to help them. "Master Gusang, there's a saying in Buddhism that goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-floor pagoda." Zhang Xiaoyang stood up from the ground and faced Gusang Dorji. He said with a smile, "I'd like to do this today." Gusang Dorji's expression changed when he heard that. "Celestial Master Zhang, you're not joking, right?" Tianqian asked Zhang Xiaoyang. What? Do I look like I'm joking? Zhang Xiaoyang retorted. This person is an evil spirit. Everyone has the right to kill him. Sect Master Zhang, as the Zhengyi sect master, don't tell me you don't know this? Dikuan narrowed his eyes and asked Zhang Xiaoyang. Evil spirit? Humph, Zhang Xiaoyang sneered. I'd like to ask, what kind of evil did he do? Did he rob by force or bully the people? Did he become an outlaw or commit murder and arson? He's the reincarnation of Eldritch. Back then, he killed without restraint and plunged the people into misery and suffering. In this life, he's also fallen into the demonic path. Shouldn't he be killed? Sang Dorji asked. The people who were tortured by this demon back then are right in front of us. How can it be fake? Killed without restraint? Plunged the people into misery and suffering? Zhang Xiaoyang laughed. Master, you really dare to say anything. What? Am I wrong? Gusang Dorji asked with a frown. Today, all the sect masters are here. Master, you can ask them who Eldritch killed back then. Zhang Xiaoyang said, and looked at the other sect masters. Back then, even a 3-year-old child knew that none of the people Eldritch killed were innocent. The sect masters whispered to each other after hearing that. Although they had not experienced Eldritch's era, they had all heard about Eldritch from the previous sect masters. What Zhang Xiaoyang said was not false. Several of the sect masters belonged to sects that had been punished by Eldritch back then. These sect masters wanted to refute Zhang Xiaoyang, but Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were the sect masters of Zhengyi and Xuanjin sect, respectively. They were the first and second largest sects in Taoism, so they did not dare to contradict them at all. Gusang Dorji glanced at the crowd, and his expression changed slightly. As for these people, oh no, these demons and monsters. Zhang Xiaoyang looked at the enemies around it with a smile and said, their appearance in this demon-slaying conference shows that what Eldritch did back then was righteous. Master, look at them. Which one of them is not evil? Which one of them is not full of evil spirit? Since this is the demon-slaying conference, why don't you get rid of them? You. Gusang Dorji was at a loss for words after being refuted by Zhang Xiaoyang and could not say a word. Celestial Master Zhang, you're wrong. Seeing that Gusang Dorji was at a loss for words, Tianqian immediately spoke up to help him. Although most of them are not human, Buddhism says that all living beings are equal. It's not wrong for them to come to this conference. All living beings are equal? Well said. Zhang Xiaoyang looked at Tianqian. Then I'd like to ask you, Dao Elder, are the father and son considered as living beings? Should they be equal? Tianqian was speechless after being questioned by Zhang Xiaoyang. Yu Xingchen tried hard not to laugh out loud after seeing Tianqian and Gusang Dorji's predicament. Although Zhang Xiaoyang was usually addicted to alcohol and scolded people, he was really eloquent when it came to reasoning. No one could compare to him. Everyone knows about what happened to the Yin-Yang 8 disciples back then. I don't think I need to say more, right? Zhang Xiaoyang continued. If it weren't for your reputation back then, you would have already transcended the tribulation and ascended, right? How could you have died at the hands of Eldritch? You. Tianqian pointed at Zhang Xiaoyang angrily. His face was red and his body was trembling. You and I are both cultivators. We both understand the principles of nature. How can you attain the Tao if you cling on to your reputation and hatred? Zhang Xiaoyang said, as for you, Master Gusang, I don't understand. Buddhism emphasizes on expiation. Back when the Buddha attained Buddhahood, the demon king appeared and caused a disturbance. The Buddha did not eliminate him. Since he has joined the demon Tao, why didn't you expiate him? Why did you have to be so ruthless? Could it be that you and Eldritch back then? Zhang Xiaoyang did not elaborate on the rest of his words and just laughed it off. However, no one was a fool. After listening to Zhang Xiaoyang's analysis, it seemed to be true. Everyone in the ritual hall slowly came to their senses. Gusang Dorji's face turned red and white when Zhang Xiaoyang hit the nail on the head. He gripped his staff so tightly that it made cracking sounds. You with the surname Zhang, you insulted the reputation of my 8 sons and slandered the reputation of Master Gusang. How should you be punished? Dikuan could not stand it anymore. He pointed his sword at Zhang Xiaoyang and shouted angrily, Reputation? Do you still care about reputation? Zhang Xiaoyang sneered. Why didn't you think about your reputation when you used your sword to cut off people's arms? Why didn't you think about your reputation when you gouged out people's eyes and tendons? Evil Moon has been trapped by your celestial device. How could you do such a despicable thing? And you even talk about reputation. Suke thought to himself, Bah! The more Zhang Xiaoyang spoke, the more excited he became. He blurted out the word damn. You're talking nonsense. Dikuan was anxious and began to stammer. I'm talking nonsense? Humph! Zhang Xiaoyang continued to sneer. Show everyone your horsetail whisk. Is it stained with eldritch blood? Then take out your sword and see if the blood on it is eldritch's. Are the sword marks on eldritch's arms caused by your sword? You. Dikuan was so angry that his whole body trembled. He could not speak a word. What? Am I right? Zhang Xiaoyang laughed. The crowd began to whisper. They whispered to each other and pointed at Dikuan. Sect leader Zhang, sect leader Yu, it seems that you have to stand up for Eldritch and his son today. Gusang Dorji said coldly with a gloomy face. In front of so many people, he said all kinds of nice words. However, Zhang Xiaoyang did not give him any face at all. This made him really embarrassed. I'm not standing up for them. I'm standing up for the good people, Zhang Xiaoyang, who was dressed in a golden robe, said sternly with his hands behind his back. Since the 2 sect leaders are so stubborn, then this old monk will offend you, Gusang Dorji said with narrowed eyes. He pointed the staff in his hand at Yi Fan and his son again. Everyone, listen up. Today we must get rid of this demon no matter what. If anyone tries to stop us, kill them. Whoosh! With Gusang Dorji's order again, the enemies who had been suppressing their anger attacked again. This time, they did not attack from a distance. Instead, they used their movement skills and rushed forward. Woo! Black wind blew. The gloomy atmosphere was gloomy. Demons roared and ghosts wailed. The entire execution field was filled with a foul atmosphere. These enemies all had at least 300 years of cultivation. They were far from ordinary masters. They immediately used their killing moves. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian stood on the left and right of Yifan and his son respectively. Their expressions were solemn, and their eyes were like torches. Chapter 617. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Over 300 enemies transformed into over 300 silhouettes, roaring and hissing as they darted straight to the 4 people in the center of the execution field. Yi Kong saw this and instinctively wanted to fight with his sword. However, his vital energy was depleted and his acupuncture points were sealed by Yu Xingqian. There was no way he could fight with the enemies. Even standing up took a lot of effort. Feeling helpless, Yi Kong hugged the armless Yi Fan tightly in his arms. Even if he had no vital energy left, he had to protect his beloved son with his own body. Old Yu, let's fight to our heart's content today. After this, I'll treat you to a drink at the Drunken Immortal restaurant. Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingqian. Then I'll have to order a few dishes and make you bleed. Yu Xingqian said with a smile. Ha! Don't worry, just close your eyes. At most, I'll perform a few more rituals for others. Zhang Xiaoyang laughed loudly. As the 2 of them spoke, they stood with their backs facing each other. Their eyes were alert and their ears were alert. At the same time, they activated the spiritual energy in their bodies. Boom! Zhang Xiaoyang's hair stood up and golden light burst out from his body. Boom! Yu Xingqian's robe fluttered and golden light enveloped his body. 2 huge golden balls of light instantly appeared on the 2 of them and quickly merged into one, forming a huge golden Taiji ball of light. The light ball was 6 feet in size and had a clear yin and yang. The golden light dazzled and spun continuously. It was very beautiful. Yi Kong and his son were enveloped by this golden Tai Chi light ball. The moment the Tai Chi light ball appeared, the 300 or so shadowy figures also rushed to the front of the light ball. They were less than 3 feet away from the light ball. After the previous lesson, the enemies used their trump card this time. The evil spirits let out horrifying howls. They activated the strong black wind and evil power, transforming into ferocious-looking evil spirits. They grabbed the golden Taiji light ball with their hands, which were covered in sharp nails. Kill! The mountain spirits and wild monsters also let out a soul-shaking roar. All kinds of 5-colored brilliance appeared around their bodies. The brilliance was in all kinds of shapes and forms, and there were all kinds of them. Some were fierce tigers, some were strange snakes, some were centipedes, and some were giant spiders. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws, and they were full of murderous intent. In order to successfully kill Eldritch, they no longer cared about their appearances and revealed their true forms. Hundreds of years of hatred caused them to instantly go crazy. They wanted nothing more than to skin Eldritch alive, drink his blood, chew his bones, and eat his flesh. The huge encirclement was rapidly shrinking. Man follows the earth, and the earth follows the heavens. Zhang Xiaoyang said loudly as he circulated his spiritual energy. The Tao of heaven, the Tao of nature. Yu Xingqian roared, his Taoist robes fluttering in the wind. As the two of them spoke, they fiercely circulated the spirit qi in their bodies. As the spiritual energy of the two of them went on a rampage, the dazzling and spinning golden Taiji light ball suddenly shone brightly and grew 3 feet taller. Outside the Taiji light sphere, 8 golden light symbols appeared. Qian, Kuan, Zhen, Sun, Kan Li Jian Dui. The 8 golden light symbols shone brightly and connected to each other, forming a huge golden 8 trigrams diagram. The Taiji Yin-Yang 8 trigrams formation suddenly appeared. The explosively expanding golden light instantly collided with the 300-plus enemies that were charging at them at high speed. Boom! 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 Black gas burst forth. Mixed lights flew everywhere. The earth shook, and the air waves spread in all directions. The Taiji Yin-Yang and Yu Xingqian's Taiji 8 trigrams formation forcibly withstood the all-out attack of the 300-plus enemies. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The 300-plus enemies pressed their palms against the huge, spinning light sphere and resisted with all their might. At the intersection between the 2 palms and the Taiji light sphere, golden light shot out in all directions, and mixed lights danced and sizzled. The enemies gritted their teeth and circulated their own original spirits with all their might. However, even though they resisted with all their might, Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian's golden Taiji light sphere remained motionless and continued to spin. This scene made all the sect masters present dumbfounded and tongue-tied. The Taiji Yin-Yang 8 trigrams formation was one of the most basic array formations in Taoism, and was also a must-learn array formation in Taoism. From the sect masters to the disciples who had just entered Taoism, it could be easily captured. It could be said that as long as one was a Taoist, almost everyone would be able to use this array formation. However, this was the first time they had seen someone who could use this array formation to such a level. One had to know that the 1,000 ghost array that was set up at Sisui River was actually activated by the Khanate 8 trigrams formation. And this Khanate 8 trigrams formation was almost no different from the Taiji 8 trigrams formation that Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian had used together. The array formation that could barely be activated by 10 top-notch Taoist experts was actually easily activated by the two of them. It was even more powerful than the Khanate 8 trigrams formation back then. The essence of the two's Taoist techniques and the strength of their spiritual qi were far beyond their imagination. If the sect masters hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it even if they were beaten to death. They weren't the only ones who were shocked. Lu Yuanshan and the old eunuch beside the crown prince, as well as Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki beside Matsumoto Takeyoshi, all had a drastic change of expression when they saw this. Lu Yuanshan's expression was solemn as he frowned slightly. Although he and Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were like fire and water, in all honesty, the two's Taoist techniques had indeed reached the pinnacle of perfection. Their casual attacks were strong and powerful, and their power was bouffant. They could easily block these experts in one move. Speaking of which, these experts were indeed not simple. In the face of such a profound Taiji Yin-Yang 8 trigrams formation, they could still maintain their figures without retreating. Without some real ability, it was impossible to do so. If it were other ghosts or demons, they would have been destroyed and their souls scattered before they could even touch this array formation. Looking at the dazzling golden light in the array formation, the old eunuch beside the crown prince's face changed slightly, and his eyes narrowed slightly. It was said that Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen of the Chuanjin sect were fooling around all day, drinking and gambling. They didn't do their jobs and neglected the sex affairs. Now it seemed that they were simply following the crowd and were full of nonsense. Although the two's personalities were polar opposites, they were extremely tacit partners. Not only that, but the two's Taoist attainments also made him admire them from the bottom of his heart. As the saying goes, a small hermit hides in the mountains, while a great hermit hides in the city. On the surface, the two's actions seemed strange and unconventional. They shuttled between mountains and rivers and went to and fro wine shops all day long. But in fact, they didn't show their true colors. It could be said that it was the fortune of Taoism and the blessing of the people to have these two experts in Taoism. Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki looked at each other and then slowly turned their heads. When they were in Dongying, they often heard that there were many experts and capable people in the Central Plains. At first, they didn't take it seriously and only thought that it was an alarmist rumor. Now that they saw it, they didn't think so anymore. The profound cultivation of their enemies, the 8 trigrams formation of the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, Gesang Doji's golden Buddha treasure bowl, Yikong's ethereal swordsmanship, Zhang Xiaoyang, and Yu Xingchen's exquisite Taoist skills were really eye-opening and amazing. What they were most interested in was Yi Fan, who was so young, but possessed such a heaven-defying cultivation. Since the two of them came to the Great Ming Dynasty, they had been keeping a low profile outside and had never seen Yi Fan use his skills. They had only heard about it from other ninjas. One move killed hundreds of ninjas. One move raised a 100-year-old Zhou mansion to ground. One move took the life of Inchan Daxion. One move defeated several experts and cut the warship, and one move seriously injured the unfathomable sand-robed envoy. To be honest, if Matsumoto Takeyoshi hadn't said it himself, the two of them wouldn't have believed that these incredible things were done by the young man in front of them, who had lost both his eyes and arms. If this person didn't die this time, they would find a chance to spar with him in the future to see if he was as powerful as the rumors said. The two of them thought to themselves. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was still calm. The situation in the execution field made it impossible for him to make a judgment. He didn't know which side would win and which side would lose, so naturally, he couldn't make a final decision. But he was sure that this time, he didn't come in vain, and he gained a lot. If Yi Fan died, then Yi Kong and the Yi family wouldn't be any better. If they didn't die, they would be injured. In this way, not only did he get rid of a fated enemy, but he also got the help of his enemies, the 8 masters of Yin and Yang and Gesang Doji. If Yi Fan didn't die, he didn't lose anything. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen saw injustice and helped, so they would naturally become friends with the Yi family. In this way, as long as he used the true soul of Fujiwara no Chico to control Yi Fan, he would indirectly control the Zhengyi sect and the Chuanjin sect. All in all, this was a profitable deal. Thinking of this, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face showed a smile. In the execution field, both sides were in a deadlock. The enemies didn't break through Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian's Taiji light ball, but they didn't take a step back either. As the saying goes, many hands make light work. If they were to fight alone, they definitely wouldn't be a match for these two. However, there were hundreds of them, and their combined cultivation had reached 10,000 years. In this way, even if the other party was from the orthodox Taoism, and they were demons and demons, they still had nothing to fear. Seeing this deadlock situation, the other sect masters looked at each other, not knowing if they should help Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian, or help their enemies. Help Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian? No. This was the demon-slaying conference, and it was a fact that Yikong's son had joined the demon Dao. If they helped them, wouldn't they be helping the demon? Moreover, they would offend the Buddha realm because of this. Help Eldritch's enemies? Even worse. Although Eldritch was very ruthless in the past, he abhorred evil and killed those who deserved to die. Moreover, these enemies were all demons and demons. If they helped them, wouldn't they be helping the evildoers? Moreover, if they helped them, they would offend the righteous sect, Chuanjin sect, and the Yi clan. How would they survive in the Taoism in the future? After thinking for a while, the sect masters came to a decision. They would turn a blind eye and turn a deaf ear. In this way, they wouldn't help either side, and they wouldn't offend either side. Moreover, they were here to participate in the demon-slaying conference, not to fight. Who was right and who was wrong had nothing to do with them. Mother of Asterisker, if I had the heavenly master sword, these bastards would have gone to hell. Within the Taiji light ball, Zhang Xiaoyang cursed. The heavenly master sword was the treasured sword of the Dragon Tiger Mountain sect masters. It was extremely powerful. Zhang Xiaoyang was often not in the sect and always felt that it was inconvenient to carry it around, so he never brought it with him. Stop complaining, Yu Xingqian said to Zhang Xiaoyang as he activated the Taiji light ball. Now that you know you didn't bring your treasured sword, why didn't you bring it earlier? Stop talking about me. Didn't you also forget to bring your azure light sword? Zhang Xiaoyang jokingly scolded Yu Xingqian. The two of them were always like this. No matter what, they would always bicker. Next, it's our turn. Tian Qian, who had been watching the battle coldly, said with a smile and slowly walked out. Hee, big brother is right. Di Kuan chimed in and walked out. He had been waiting for Tian Qian to say this for a long time. Zhang Xiaoyang's words just now made him lose face, so he had been holding a grudge. The other six understood tacitly and slowly walked out. Now that both sides were in a deadlock, it was time for them to benefit. Today, the Yin-Yang 8 disciples will enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. First, we'll kill the evil spirit, then we'll get rid of you two scums of Taoism. As Tian Qian spoke, he pulled out the treasured sword on his back and charged towards the Taiji light ball. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Seeing that Tian Qian had made his move, the remaining 7 disciples pulled out their treasured swords and tapped the ground with their toes. They activated their spirit chi and pointed their swords at Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian, who were in the Taiji light ball. The 8 swords, which were as dazzling as frost and snow, pierced towards the Taiji light ball in unison. "Hold you, hold on for me." Zhang Xiaoyang opened his eyes wide and roared as he activated his spirit chi. Yu Xingqian kept his mouth shut and activated his spirit chi to the maximum. Although the two of them looked down on the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, they knew that the 8 of them did not have an undeserved reputation. But as the two of them increased their spirit chi, the Taiji light ball expanded by another 3 feet. Tian Qian, who was in midair, smirked. This time, Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian would definitely die. One had to know that the Yin-Yang 8 disciples were not those useless pawns, but orthodox Taoism. In the blink of an eye, the 8 swords emitting golden spirit chi charged towards the golden Taiji light ball. The tips of the swords had already touched the Taiji light ball. Whoosh! At this moment, a huge pure white arc of light descended from the sky and struck the swords in the Yin-Yang 8 disciples' hands. Bang! 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 The swords in the Yin-Yang 8 disciples' hands broke apart and fell to the ground. The 8 of them immediately stopped in their tracks and looked towards the sky. They saw a white-robed Yi Yun and a furious Yi Chun descending from the sky. Chapter 6:18. Whoosh, after the white arc of light broke the 8 swords in the hands of the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, its power did not decrease, and it went straight for the enemies of the Eldritch. The enemies of the Eldritch who were dealing with the Tai Chi light ball, with all their strength, did not dare to be slow. They immediately used their movement techniques to escape from the Tai Chi light ball. Boom! The light arc directly hit the ground of the execution field. Broken stones flew everywhere, and the airwaves surged. A huge ditch of 7 to 8 feet long and half a foot deep appeared on the hard rock ground. As the enemies left the Tai Chi light ball, a gap appeared in the power of the siege. The stalemate of power was broken in an instant. Bang! 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 More than a dozen enemies withdrew their forces, and Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen had already raised their spiritual energy to a very high level. The remaining enemies were instantly knocked back by the golden Taiji light ball that was expanding rapidly, and they were sent flying backward. The second siege failed again. Whoosh! Whoosh! Yi Yun, who held the snow thread sword, and Yi Chun, who had an angry expression, landed on the ground. Boom! 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 33 tall, golden bronze men landed on the ground with a loud boom. The two of them waited for a long time below the Feishue peak when they did not see Yi Kong send a signal. Then they saw the explosion of golden light on the mountain peak. They knew that Yi Kong had already fought with the enemy. So they brought the 33 bronze men and used their movement techniques to go up to Feishue peak. The soles and legs of these 33 bronze statues were equipped with delicate jumping mechanisms. They were extremely powerful. Although each bronze statue weighed over 500 kilograms, and with the heavy weapons they carried, they could weigh over 600 kilograms. However, with the delicate springs that could carry over 1,000 kilograms of force, they could still leap over 100 feet into the air. The power of the bronze men could be seen. It was Yi Yun and Yi Chun, and the bronze men. They were all here. The crown prince was delighted. He guessed that Yi Kong would not come alone. Yi Yun and Yi Chun would definitely come as well. But he never thought that they would bring the bronze men. These 30-odd bronze men were extremely tall, reaching up to 10 feet tall. They were covered in bronze armor, and even their faces were covered with chainmail woven from fine bronze. Looking at the weapons they brought, it was even more shocking. These bronze men were equipped with a complete set of weapons. They held long spears in their hands, long sword at their waists, crossbows, and quiver on their backs. Inside the quiver, nearly 1,000 arrows were densely packed. However, this wasn't much. What was most inconceivable was that the eyes of these bronze men, which were twice the height of a normal person, were flashing with blue flames. They were like willow, the wisps, causing people to tremble in fear. What a group of bronze men! The crown prince could not help but exclaimed in his heart. If they had such an army of bronze men, Matsumoto Takeyoshi and his ninjas would be like ants trying to shake a tree, a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The crown prince was not the only one who was shocked. In the execution field, other than the Yi family, all the enemies, the sect leaders, and the thousands of spectators were all stunned by the scene in front of them. Even Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were inexplicably shocked and did not dare to believe it. They were shocked by Yi Yun's majestic sword energy and the dozens of bronze men of the Yi family. The rumor that the Yi family had bronze men had been circulating in Jianghu, and it was said to be miraculous. But even so, no one had seen the real bronze men, so they had always thought that it was a false rumor with exaggerated details. Now that they had seen it, it was as the rumor said. Not only were there bronze men protecting them, there were dozens of them. This time, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's expression became ugly. He was not surprised by the exciting fight just now, but now he was frowning with worry at the appearance of the bronze men. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had always been far-sighted when looking at problems. He was not a short-sighted person. The appearance of the bronze men allowed him to predict the future battles on the battlefield. From the movements of the bronze men and the weapons they carried, the strength of the bronze men was not something that ordinary mechanisms could compare to. The design of the bronze men was exquisite and the construction was precise. It could be said to be a work of art that surpassed the heavens. Once the bronze men were mass-produced and formed into an army, what would the result be if they were placed on the battlefield? Originally, he had thought that only the Yi family's weapon forging manual could catch his eye. Now it seemed that the value of the bronze men was no less than the weapon forging manual. Once he mastered the method of forging the bronze men, it was like having a magnificent army. No, it was far superior to a magnificent army. Fanair, Konger. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was thinking of a plan when Yi Yun, who was holding the snow thread sword, roared and quickly walked in front of Yi Kong and Yi Fan. Looking at his only son, Yi Kong, who had exhausted all of his vitality and was bleeding from the corner of his mouth, and his grandson, Yi Fan, who was no longer in a human shape, Yi Yun, who was over 50 years old, trembled as tears streamed down his face. The suffering of his beloved son and grandson made him feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. It was an indescribable pain. Big brother, nephew. Yi Chun, who was full of anger, also quickly walked in front of Yi Fan and his son, crying as he shouted. The tragic scene in front of him made him almost unable to believe his eyes. Father, little brother Chun, Yi Kong said with difficulty. Grandfather, Uncle Chun. Yi Fan, who had lost both his arms, heard the voices of the two people. He raised his head and looked at them with a pair of bloody holes and said weakly, Yi Yun and Yi Chun were in so much pain that they could not say a word. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian saw that the people from the Yi clan had arrived, and they were slightly relieved. From the conversation, these two people were the head of the Yi clan, Snow Thread Sword Yi Yun, and the former assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Absolute Pin Needle Yi Chun, who was proficient in the art of divination and the ability to gather information. With the help of the two of them, their chances of victory had increased by a few %. Yi Yun is extremely grateful for the help of the two sect masters. Yi Yun, whose eyes were red, stood up and bowed to Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian. Without the two of them, Yi Yun would have lost his only son and grandson, and he would have to send his son off. Yi Chun also stood up and bowed deeply to the two of them. Old hero Yi, how could we dare to receive such a great bow from you? Zhang Xiaoyang saw Yi Yun bowing to him and hurriedly reached out to help him up. As the head of the Yi clan, Yi Yun had an extremely high status in the Jianghu. Moreover, Yi Yun was benevolent and generous and did not care about trifles. He was deeply respected by the people of the Jianghu. If not for the upheaval that had befallen the Yi clan, even the sect masters in the execution field would have to be respectful to him. Assistant Minister Yi, please rise, Yu Xingqian said as he helped Yi Chun up. Although Yi Chun was not as famous as Yi Yun or Yi Kong in the Jianghu, he was extremely famous among the common people. During his time as an official in the court, he was clean and honest, and loved the people as if they were his own children. He would often use his official position and the influence of the Yi clan to help the poor people redress their grievances and solve their problems. If there is injustice to be redressed, there is Assistant Minister Yi in the court. This was a popular saying among the common people, and it was referring to Yi Chun. You are the head of the Yi clan. Tian Qian saw Yi Yun break the swords in the hands of the 8 yin-yang masters and immediately asked with narrowed eyes. Who would have thought that before he could say the word Yun, a huge sword arc with a white light slashed toward him? Whoosh! The arc of light was 30 feet long, and it was as bright as snow. The white light shot into the eyes with a clanging sound. What a fast sword! The head of the Yi clan had made his move. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian were secretly shocked. The two of them did not even have time to see how Yi Yun swung his sword. They only saw a white light flash beside them, and the huge arc of sword Qi whistled toward Tian Qian like lightning. The majestic sword chi from the snow thread sword slashed across the ground and instantly reached Tian Qian, who was 30 feet away. The dazzling white light illuminated Tian Qian's terrified face. He had heard of the Yi clan's weapon forging manual, and he knew that the manual not only contained supreme techniques for forging divine weapons, but also unfathomable sword chi cultivation methods. However, he did not expect Yi Yun's sword to be so fast. It was so fast that he did not even see how his opponent made his move. It was no wonder that Tian Qian was the head of the 8 yin-yang masters. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, his expression would not change. In a flash, he gathered spiritual energy in his palms and abruptly formed a 3 feet thick golden semicircle chi shield in front of him. The chi shield shone with a dazzling golden light and trembled slightly, covering the entire area in front of him. When Di Kuan saw this, he felt as if a rock had been lifted from his heart. Tian Qian was the head of the 8 yin-yang masters. His Tao skills were far superior to his, and his spiritual energy cultivation was unfathomable. As long as Tian Qian's chi shield was released, it did not matter if it was a rain of swords or arrows. It would be nothing. However, he was wrong. If it was another sword chi expert, his analysis would not be wrong. However, the one who made the move this time was none other than Yi Yun, the head of the Yi family, Snow Thread, Sword Yi Yun. This person's sword chi was not as simple as he thought. Everyone who cultivated sword chi understood one principle. In order to unleash the full power of a sword move, there were 3 most important points. First, divine weapon. Second, sword chi cultivation. Third, mind and spirit as one. Only with the strongest divine weapon and the strongest sword chi cultivation could one unleash the full power of a sword move by reaching the realm of man and sword as one. And Yi Yun already possessed all 3 of these points. Let's talk about divine weapon first. The snow thread sword in Yi Yun's hand was completely different from Yi Fan's cold dragon leaving fire and Yi Kong's inverse scale sword. Cold dragon leaving fire was a spiritual sword. One was cold and the other was hot, and its spiritual might was tyrannical. Yi Kong's inverse scale sword was blazing with yang qi, and its might was tyrannical. However, Yi Yun's snow thread sword only had one word, and that was power. Using the secret method in the armament forging manual to forge the snow thread sword for 3 years, it was born with sword chi. On the day the sword was forged, a white light would burst out from the sword furnace and continue for 3 days. This sword was definitely worthy of being called a divine weapon. The second point was sword chi cultivation. Before Yi Yun met sword immortal Yi Feng, he was already an expert in sword chi. The sword chi in the armament forging manual had been cultivated to perfection by him. After receiving Yi Feng's guidance, his sword chi cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. During his time in the Mongolian Empire, Yi Yun had been studying the sword immortal mantra that Yi Feng had taught him day and night. He had already grasped the basics. Not only did his sword chi cultivation increase dramatically, it was also 10 times sharper than before. As for the third point, mind and spirit as one, there was no need to even mention it. His beloved son, Yi Kong, and beloved grandson, Yi Fan, had suffered so much that there was only one word in his mind right now: revenge. The concentrated killing intent cleared his mind of all distractions, and mind and spirit as one. Divine weapon, snow thread sword immortal, mind and spirit as one. Yi Yun's sword move was already close to perfection. Swoosh! The huge white sword arc was like light and lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it went straight for Tian Qian. Boom! The white light flashed past, and golden light burst forth. Following a loud noise, the 3-foot golden spiritual energy barrier in front of Tian Qian was instantly split open by Yi Yun's majestic sword chi, as if it was tofu. Bang! The golden spiritual energy barrier was instantly split into 2. Tian Qian's expression changed drastically. The remaining 7 sons were dumbfounded. The powerful golden spiritual energy barrier was so weak in front of Yi Yun's sword chi. However, this was not the end. After the dazzling white sword arc pierced through the 3-foot-thick spiritual energy barrier, its power did not diminish as it went straight for Tianqian's face. Chapter 619. Boom! Under the incredulous gazes of the experts, the blazing white and majestic sword Qi instantly struck Tianqian's chest. Tianqian was instantly engulfed by the dazzling white light. Bang! Under the powerful impact of the snowy sword arcs, the shocked heavenly Qian arched his body and flew backwards, crashing into a giant rock 70 feet behind him at high speed. Boom! Tianqian's body spread out and instantly crashed into the solid rock that was more than 30 feet tall. It was as if he was embedded in it. Whoosh! Before they could recover from their shock, Yi Yun's second sword arc appeared once more. However, a dazzling white sword arc appeared in the blink of an eye and slashed towards Tianqian, who was embedded in the boulder. This sword chi was almost twice the size of the previous one. It was 50 feet long and dazzling. It was so fast that it made a sharp sound. Whoosh! While the crowd was still in shock, Yi Yun made his move. With the dazzling snow sword in his hand, he executed his sword chi movement skill and turned into a white shadow. He followed closely behind the sword chi and went straight for Tianqian. Yi Yun did not make a move, but he did make 3 consecutive moves. He wanted to personally cut this sanctimonious leader of the 8 yin-yang elites in half. Yi Yun's movement skill was so fast that it was not slower than the sword chi. When the second sword chi hit Tianqian's chest, Yi Yun's dazzling snow sword also slashed down at the same time. Boom! A loud sound was heard as the white light danced and the airwaves dispersed. Bang! Under the impact of Yi Yun's 2 sword chis, the huge rock that Tianqian was embedded in exploded into countless rock fragments. Crash! Rock fragments fell from the sky as if it was raining rocks. From the time Yi Yun executed the first sword chi to when Yi Yun executed his movement skill and hit Tianqian, it was only a blink of an eye. Yi Yun's sword chi cultivation was so high that it was obvious. The experts were stunned. They had never seen such a domineering sword chi cultivation. The execution field was strangely quiet. What a fast sword! What fast sword! Zhang Xiaoyang's eyes widened as he looked at the stone rain and the smoke-like stone mist in front of him. This Yi Yun was indeed worthy of being the head of the Yi clan. His attack was so earth-shattering. This time, Tianqian was dead for sure. No matter who it was, there was no chance of survival after receiving 3 consecutive strikes from Yi Yun's snow thread sword. Yu Xingqian was also secretly impressed by Yi Yun's sword chi cultivation. One had to know that Yi Yun was over 50 years old at this time. He was already in his prime. To be able to release such a majestic sword chi and display such an astonishing movement technique at such a young age was simply inconceivable. Big Brother, Di Kuan, who had regained his senses, shouted towards the stone fog that filled the sky. Big Brother, Big Brother. The remaining 6 also cried out involuntarily. Tianqian, who was still full of vigor just a moment ago, had been slashed 3 times in the blink of an eye. They simply could not accept this. The Crown Prince sneered. This time, their big brother had probably been slashed into several pieces by Yi Yun's snow thread sword. Matsumoto Takayoshi's expression was cold as he quietly observed the situation in the execution field. He would definitely not give the order to attack before the outcome was decided. Whoosh! A cold wind blew past. The dust in the execution field was instantly blown away by this cold wind. When Yi Yun and Tianqian's figures appeared in front of everyone's eyes, everyone let out a gasp of surprise. They could not believe the scene in front of them. Tianqian had used his sleeves to block Yi Yun's snow thread sword that was emitting white light. How was that possible? Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian were instantly dumbfounded. They had seen Yi Yun's unparalleled sword chi with their own eyes. Logically speaking, Tianqian should have died on the spot. How could he block Yi Yun's attack with just his sleeves? The crown prince's mouth was slightly agape in shock. Like Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian, he was also in disbelief at the scene in front of him. He could not figure it out. Lu Yuanshan frowned with a puzzled expression. The 8 yin-yang disciples belonged to the same sect as him. He knew very well how high their cultivation was. As the leader of the 8 yin-yang disciples, Tianqian's cultivation was indeed extraordinary. However, it was definitely not to the extent where he could block 3 of Yi Yun's majestic sword qi with just his sleeves. There must be something fishy about this. Your Highness, the black robe he's wearing is definitely not simple, the old eunuch whispered to the crown prince. The moment the old eunuch said that, the crown prince and Lu Yuanshan were instantly enlightened. It turned out that it was not Tianqian's cultivation that had blocked Yi Yun's sword qi, but his black robe. The old eunuch was right. The reason why Tianqian was able to block Yi Yun's 3 major sword qi was not because of his cultivation. It was because he was wearing the demonic realm's secret treasure that he had snatched from Yi Fan, the 8 treasures robe. This robe was one of the demonic realm's secret treasures. It was invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire. It was not inferior to the flawless Taoist robe that the white-robed sky dragon had given to Yi Fan. Not to mention Yi Yun's sword qi, even the Zenith Heaven Immortal's immortal technique would not be able to damage it. At this moment, the flawless Taoist robe was worn by Fujiwara no Chico, and the 8 treasures robe had been snatched away by Tianqian. It was because of this that Yi Fan's arms were chopped off, and Tianqian was able to survive Yi Yun's sword qi. There must be something wrong with his black robe. Yu Xingqian said to Zhang Xiaoyang with a frown after carefully observing Tianqian with his heaven's eye. Under his heaven's eye, Tianqian's gold-threaded black robe was filled with spiritual energy, and it shone brightly. It was obviously not an ordinary item. Zhang Xiaoyang frowned. My 2 benefactors, Yi Fan said weakly to the 2 of them. The black robe he is wearing was stolen from me. You must be. Be careful, no wonder. Yu Xingqian nodded with a serious expression. Despicable and shameless dog. Zhang Xiaoyang cursed as soon as he heard Yi Fan's words. This robe could easily block Yi Yun's unparalleled sword qi. It seemed that it would not be easy to defeat the 8 yin-yang disciples this time. In the center of the execution ground, Yi Yun was using all his strength to activate the snow sword in his hand and continuously press down on Tianqian's raised robe. To be honest, he had not expected Tianqian to remain unscathed under his sword qi attacks, which were faster and stronger than the last. Tianqian had used only one sleeve to receive his full-powered attack. Buzz, the snow sword shone brightly under Yi Yun's control, and sword qi overflowed. However, it was completely ineffective. Tianqian had also witnessed the power of the 8 treasure jade silk robe, and he was secretly cheering in his heart. The moment Yi Yun's snow sword slashed down, Tianqian instinctively raised his sleeve to block. He did not expect that this block would coincidentally save his life. It was indeed a good treasure. Tianqian was overjoyed. He used his right sleeve to block Yi Yun's snow sword while he secretly gathered spiritual energy in his left hand. Buzz, Tianqian's left palm suddenly shone with golden light. Whoosh! While Yi Yun was holding the sword with both hands and channeling sword qi with all his might, Tianqian's golden left palm instantly slapped toward Yi Yun. Although Yi Yun did not understand how Tianqian could withstand his 3 consecutive attacks so easily, Tianqian's counterattack was still within Yi Yun's expectations. Seeing Tianqian's palm strike, Yi Yun immediately freed his right palm and gathered sword qi in his palm. Buzz, white light shone from Yi Yun's right palm. At the same time, he pushed his palm forward to meet Tianqian's golden palm strike. This time, Tianqian's plan was wrong. His treasured robe could indeed block all attacks, but the prerequisite was that the opponent's attack had to land on the treasured robe. Now that their palms were clashing, the treasured robe was completely useless. He originally thought that Yi Yun's sword qi was powerful and that his palms were definitely weak. However, he was wrong. Yi Yun's sword qi was not only released by the sword and saber. Back in the battle at the Yi family's ancestral home, Yun was already able to unleash sword chi with his bare hands, and he could instantly slash apart buildings made of granite. Now that he had received guidance from the Sword Immortal, Yi Feng, his sword chi was much purer than before. Smack! When their palms met, there was an earth-shattering sound. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. Yi Yun's sword chi could split Tian Qian's 3 feet spiritual energy shield in half, let alone Tian Qian's palms. A white light shot out from Yi Yun's palm and instantly pierced through Tian Qian's golden light and through his left arm. Swoosh! After the white light pierced through Tian Qian's left arm, it instantly shot out from behind his shoulder. Puff! A bloody mist gushed out from the hole that Yi Yun's sword chi had pierced through. Ah! Tian Qian let out a blood-curdling scream as his body flew backward and landed heavily on the ground 3 feet away. At this moment, from his left palm all the way to his left shoulder, there was a 3-inch bloody hole that pierced through his entire arm. His left arm could be considered as crippled. Big brother! Di Kuan roared as he rushed toward the fallen Tian Qian. The other 6 also used their movement techniques and rushed over. Big brother! Big brother! Di Kuan helped Tian Qian up from the ground and shouted loudly. Tian Qian's face was ghastly pale as his left arm drooped down, bleeding profusely. Di Kuan quickly tapped a few acupoints on Tian Qian's left arm to stop the bleeding. This scene made all the experts present feel as if they were in a dream. Didn't Tian Qian use one sleeve to block Yi Yun's snow thread sword? How did Yi Yun's sword chi pierce through his left arm in the blink of an eye? If he could even block the snow thread sword, how could he not block Yi Yun's palm energy? All the experts could not figure it out. Ha ha! Retribution! Retribution! Zhang Xiaoyang roared with laughter. Yu Xingchen stroked his beard and nodded with a smile. Others did not understand what was going on, but the two of them could not be any clearer. Being too smart for your own good was exactly what people like Tian Qian were talking about. You've cut off 2 of my grandson's arms. There's still one left, Yi Yun said to the Yin Yang 8 disciples with his sword in one hand. Yi Yun, I want your life. Di Kuan roared. He turned around and gathered his spiritual energy to activate the horsetail whisk in his hand. The soft and smooth tail of the horsetail whisk instantly straightened under his control, and golden light shot out in all directions. Wong, Wong, Wong. The other 6 disciples were also enraged as they activated the horsetail whisks in their hands. Chapter 620. Hearing Yi Yun's arrogant words, Di Kuan was infuriated. He swung the tail of the horsetail whisk, which was shining with a golden light, towards Yi Yun and hacked down. Swoosh! A huge golden arc of light shot out from the fly whisk in his hand, heading straight for Yi Yun. The arc of light was 3 feet long, flowing with golden light and surging spiritual energy. Its speed was too fast for the eyes to take in. The enraged Di Kuan used 60% of his spiritual energy. Swoosh! 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 At the same time, the other 6 Yin Yang 8 disciples made their moves at the same time, swinging the fly whisks in their hands. 7 huge golden arcs of light came from 7 different directions, heading straight for Yi Yun, who was several feet away. The ground of the execution field was instantly illuminated by the 7 golden arcs of light. What powerful spiritual energy! Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were secretly shocked. The Yin Yang 8 disciples were indeed worthy of their reputation. They had mastered the true teachings of Taoism. If Yi Yun and Yi Chun hadn't appeared in time, just now, the Taiji light sphere that the two of them had set up together might very well have been destroyed by the hundreds of enemies that had swarmed over together with the Yin Yang 8 disciples. Looking at Yi Yun again, seeing the 7 of them attacking at the same time, he smiled and activated the snow sword in his hand. Buzz under Yi Yun's control, the snow sword instantly shone with a bright white light, and the sword aura surged. It trembled slightly in excitement and buzzed continuously. At this time, Yi Yun's hair and beard were fluttering in the wind. His body was surrounded by sword aura, and the white light shone brightly. It was as if a sword immortal had descended to the mortal world. Around him, a 3 feet wide ball of light with flowing brilliance had already formed. Unlike Yi Kong's ball of light, Yi Yun's ball of light was completely formed by countless sharp sword auras. Swoosh, the 7 golden arcs of light were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they were less than 3 feet away from Yi Yun's ball of light. Overconfident, Lu Yuanshan, who was standing beside the crown prince, thought to himself, Tian Qian's spirit chi cultivation was far above the 7 of them, but in the end, he was still instantly destroyed by Yi Yun's sword chi. The 7 of them seemed to have incomparable power, but in reality, it was flashy without substance. It was completely unable to pose any threat to Yi Yun. This time, the 7 of them would most likely lose an arm or a leg. Lu Yuanshan was not the only one with such thoughts. Zhang Xiaoyang, Yu Xingqin, Sasaki, Miyamoto Akichi, the old eunuch, as well as the various enemies and sect leaders, all believed that the 8 Yin-Yang disciples were going to suffer this time. Even the head of the 8 Scions was not a match for Yi Yun, let alone the others. The 8 Yin-Yang disciples were bound to lose this battle. However, what happened next caused everyone's expression to change drastically. Swish, swish, swish. When the 7 golden arcs of light were less than a meter away from Yi Yun's sword chi light ball, they seemed to have a mind of their own and instantly merged into one. Buzz, the 7 golden arcs of light that were 30 feet long instantly turned into huge golden arcs of light that were 90 feet long and filled with violent spirit chi. The golden arcs of light were extremely dazzling. Like a huge golden machete, they rushed towards Yi Yun's sword chi light ball at a speed that the naked eye could not follow. The 8 Yin-Yang disciples had cultivated together for many years and were already mentally connected. Naturally, the spirit chi moves they used were also well connected. After seeing Yi Yun use his majestic sword chi to destroy one of Tian Qian's arms, the 7 of them did not dare to underestimate Yi Yun anymore. The moment Di Kuan activated his horsetail whisk, the 6 of them understood Di Kuan's intention and attacked together. Combining 7 into 1, they gathered their strength to destroy Yi Yun's sword chi and avenge their elder brother, Tian Qian. When Yi Yun saw that the 7 golden arcs of light had merged into one, his expression changed drastically. He did not expect that the cultivation of the 7 of them had actually reached the stage where they were mentally connected and could merge 7 different powers into one. To reach such a stage was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Speed, strength, direction, height, angle, timing of attack, close coordination of timing, and even the rhythm of breathing had to be perfect and flawless. Otherwise, not only would it not increase the power, but it would also cancel each other out. On the contrary, once the different moves were perfectly merged into one, the increase in power was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. The difference in strength between breaking 1 chopstick and breaking 10 chopsticks was not as simple as 10 times. When the 7 of them merged 7 different powers into one, their strength would increase by at least 10 times. Buzz, thinking of this, Yi Yun did not dare to be negligent. With a thought, he activated his sword chi to the maximum and used all his strength to resist the overbearing golden arcs of light that were coming towards him. Just as Yi Yun activated his sword chi, the golden arcs of light that were 90 feet long collided with his sword chi light ball. Boom! A loud sound was heard, and air waves spread in all directions. White light splattered and golden light shone brightly. Chi! The huge golden arcs of light cut straight into Yi Yun's sword chi light ball half a foot deep. Yi Yun, who was protected by his sword chi, was pushed back 5 feet by the huge impact of the golden arcs of light. He forcefully stabilized his body and activated his sword chi at the same time as he activated the sword chi on his snow sword to resist the golden arcs of light that cut into the sword chi light ball. At this moment, he did not dare to relax in the slightest. The moment he relaxed, the golden arcs of light would directly pierce through his sword chi light ball and split him into 2 from head to toe. Buzz! Yi Yun's sword chi began to increase explosively. Under Yi Yun's full resistance, the golden arcs of light that were like huge golden machetes gradually stopped. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The huge golden arcs of light and Yi Yun's sword chi light ball were in a stalemate. Dazzling golden and white arcs of light shot out and sizzled. Yi Yun, today, I will make you pay with your blood. Di Kuan roared crazily. He activated his horsetail whisk again and waved it towards Yi Yun. The remaining 6 people also waved their horsetail whisks and attacked again. Swoosh! The golden light rose again and the golden arcs of light appeared again. The second huge golden arc of light pounced towards Yi Yun. This time, the 7 of them used their spiritual power to the maximum. The golden machete of light was 13 feet long. The golden light was blazing and majestic. This time, they wanted to kill Yi Yun completely and split him into 2. Swoosh! The speed of the second golden arc of light was much faster than the first golden arc of light by several times. In just a moment, the second golden arc of light rushed into Yi Yun's sword chi light ball and merged with the first golden arc of light. "Old you quick!" In a flash, Zhang Xiaoyang shouted to Xing Chun, "Quickly go and help." As he spoke, he prepared to help Yi Yun. The first arc of light was able to cut through Yi Yun's sword chi light ball. After the second arc of light and the first arc of light merged into one, the power was so strong that Yi Yun could not fight against it alone. Yu Xingchen understood and prepared to go together. However, just as the 2 of them were about to use their skills to help, the 300 enemies attacked them again. Swoosh! 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 The enemies struck out with their palms, each using their skills and techniques, each emitting light. More than 300 pairs of palms and more than 600 light pillars shot towards the 2 sect leaders. They saw that the Yin Yang 8 disciples had the upper hand, so they attacked together to stop Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen from helping. They wanted to delay the 2 of them to ensure that Yi Yun was successfully killed. Yi Kong's primordial qi was depleted, and he no longer had the ability to fight. Although Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were skilled in Dao, they could only parry the attacks of more than 300 experts without the ability to fight back. This way, as long as Yi Yun was dead, the rest of the matter would be much easier to deal with. The Yin Yang 8 disciples and their 300 enemies could completely crush Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen, and then cut Eldritch and his son into pieces. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen saw that the enemies were attacking again, so they could only activate their vital energy again and use the Yin Yang 8 trigrams formation again, laying down the golden Tai Chi light ball. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. More than 600 light pillars shot onto the Tai Chi light ball in unison, causing countless 5-colored light fragments to fly in all directions, making sizzling sounds. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen wanted to help Yi Yun, but they could not leave at all. They looked at Yi Yun's side. Buzz after the 7 disciples, 2 huge golden arcs merged into one. The golden light suddenly exploded, and the vital energy went berserk. Boom! White light splashed everywhere. Golden light exploded, and the vital energy fluctuated violently. Yi Yun's pure white sword chi light ball was instantly split in half by the dazzling golden arc of light. In the blink of an eye, Yi Yun held the snow sword in his hand horizontally, blocking the impact of the golden arc of light. However, the power of the golden arc of light was too strong. Even though Yi Yun used the snow sword to block it with all his might, his body was still sent flying by the huge impact. Puffed! Yi Yun only felt a tightness in his chest, a sweet taste in his throat, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. From his 3 consecutive attacks hitting Tian Qian, to his palm meeting Tian Qian's palm and crippling his arm, from the 7 disciples' joint attack to his sword chi being broken and blood spurting out of his mouth, all of this happened in just a few moments. In this short period of time, he went from victory to defeat, from crushing his opponent to being utterly defeated. It was like ice and fire at the same time. In the execution field, the sect leaders were so shocked by the exciting battle that they could not say a word. They were now in the same situation as Matsumoto Takeyoshi, unable to determine which side was stronger. Head of the family. When Yi Chun saw Yi Yun spurting out blood and flying backward, he immediately used his movement technique and jumped into the air, hugging the heavily injured Yi Yun. "Father!" Yi Kong shouted hoarsely. "Grandfather!" Yi Fan also shouted hoarsely. Although his eyes were destroyed, his hearing was not damaged. Not only did he hear Yi Yun spurting out blood, he also heard Yi Yun's situation from Yi Chen's shout. At this moment, Grandfather Yi Yun's injuries were not much better than Father Yi Kong's. Old hero Yi, Zhang Xiaoyang, who was in the Taiji light ball, urged his spiritual power to resist the attacks of his enemies as he shouted loudly, "Head of the family! Head of the family!" Hugging Yi Yun, Yi Chun slowly landed on the ground. His eyes were red as he shook Yi Yun in his arms. Hearing Yi Chen's shout, Yi Yun slowly opened his eyes. Using the snow to support himself, he stood up with great difficulty. His complexion was deathly pale, but his eyes were still incomparably sharp. The stumbling Yi Yun turned his head and said to Yi Chun, "Use the copper man to take Fan Air and the others away. Don't care about me." As he spoke intermittently, blood foam flowed out of his mouth and dripped to the ground. At this moment, he had already resolved to die. The only thing he could do now was to use the Burning Heavens diagram on his back. But at this moment, he was already heavily injured. If he activated the Burning Heavens diagram, not only would he lose 10 years of his life, he might even lose his life because of it. But using one life to exchange for the lives of his beloved son and grandson, it was worth it. "Father!" Yi Kong heard Yi Yun's tone and shouted loudly with red eyes. No one knew his father better than his son. He knew what Yi Yun was thinking better than anyone else. "Uncle Chun, take my father and grandfather away. Don't care about me." Yi Fan shouted hoarsely. "Everything started because of me, so I should be the one to pay for it. I'm now a cripple. I'm not worth it for you to do this. Go. Chun'er, take them away now." Yi Yun, with blood dripping from his mouth, glanced at Yi Fan and said to Yi Chun, "Head of the family, you can't do this." Yi Chen's voice was choked with sobs. "I'm now the head of the Yi family. You want to defy orders?" Yi Yun turned his head to look at Yi Chun. "Head of the family." Yi Chen's tears fell like rain. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen, who were inside the Tai Chi light sphere, saw this situation and their eyes turned red. Di Kuan sneered and prepared to make another move to completely eliminate the Yi family. "After fighting for so long, you still can't solve the problem. Leave this eldritch life to me." He. Just as the 7 of them were about to make a move, a voice came from the sky. The voice was sinister and high-pitched, resonating through the clouds. Everyone immediately looked up to the sky. A large mass of black clouds was rushing towards them from the southeast. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.